essence of all of existence. And I don't even know what to say. I mean, basically, Mashiach is coming, the Messiah of the Jewish people, and the entire world is coming soon. The Lubavitcher Rebbe told us in 1951 that this is the last generation of exile and the first generation of the redemption when the Mashiach will come. And he was really even referencing what his own father-in-law said, that he said that really all of the divine service that the Jewish people need to do during the exile is already finished. Now we just need to polish the buttons. I guess buttons on the shirt, I guess. But we just need to polish the buttons to prepare. And then later on in the 90s, he said, we're even done with polishing the buttons. And now we're just literally just here to greet Mashiach. Not only that, but in the times of the Talmud, more than 1,600 years ago, approximately, take or give, it says that all of the end of times for waiting for the Mashiach have already passed more than 1,500 to 1,600 years ago. And now it's only dependent on teshuvah, on returning to the Creator. And in the 1990s, the Rebbe even quoted his own father-in-law from earlier in the 1900s saying that we've already done the teshuvah as well. So everything that was holding it back has already happened. Not only have the end times passed, but we've also already done the teshuvah. And not only that, but the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, wrote in a famous letter to his brother around the 1500s. He said that, early 1700s, that he had this whole vision where he went to the heavens, the spiritual worlds, and he met Mashiach. He met the soul of Mashiach. And besides for a lot of other things that are mentioned in the letter, he asked the Jewish Messiah in the heavens, when are you coming? And the Messiah said, when your wellsprings, when your teachings reach out and spread to the entire world, which was quoting a verse from the book of Proverbs, by the way. When your wellsprings spread outside. So that statement, it was a private letter written by the Baal Shem Tov to his brother, but it was publicized by Chabad. That's pretty much the whole purpose of the Hasidic Judaism, is to spread the teachings of the Torah, the deeper teachings that explain Kabbalah and explain the soul of the Torah. And that's already been done, it says, but we can just keep doing more. Hi, welcome, Jim.
Hello, how are you?
Nice to meet you. Have you met before?
I don't think we have.
All right, well, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. The reason I came up, I recently saw a video about Judaism, and I was just curious to hear because I didn't know if this person was actually not knowledgeable about what they were talking about or not.
I don't know if I'm knowledgeable, but I might be.
There we go. So it was essentially that there was a period in the history of Jewish people where each tribe of Israel had their own patron god that they were allowed to worship, and that Adonai was not the ultimate sovereign one. But then there was a period where Adonai became sovereign over the rest of the gods of Israel.
Never heard of it, and it doesn't make any sense according to the accounts. Did he give a source for a statement or no?
So yeah, they I think they quoted from Torah, where they said if I can think of the verses, it was like this one about when David was taken away from Israel and he wasn't able to worship his God, which was Adonai, because he did not have the soil of the kingdom of Israel, and he had to bring the soil of Israel to where he was in order to be able to worship Adonai, because he could only worship him. They were only sovereign over the land of each kingdom that they were set upon.
I mean, being sovereign over a land is one thing, but having multiple gods is an entirely different thing.
Okay, so there's only. That's what I thought when I've spoken to Jews before, and I've always was under the impression that you guys worshipped one singular sovereign God that was not separate.
That's what Judaism is. I mean, without that, there's not only is there no Judaism, but there's no world. I mean, that's literally the entire purpose of everything. To know there's one creator. And what does it mean to know there's one creator? Not just that there's some deity out in outer space or something, but the one creator who's in everything, and everything that happens is happening from the creator. And the singular creator is, on the one hand, beyond the universe, but also found in every detail of the universe, causing everything to happen. And basically, nothing can happen on its own. Everything happens only because the creator is
gotcha. So would you say that is the most important principle of Judaism?
That is, yeah, probably. That was the whole point of why the creator chose Abraham, the founder of Judaism, because Abraham recognized the singular creator on his own. even though people knew about him before, but they didn't know about him on their own. Abraham grew up amongst idolaters who would worship the sun and the moon and everything. And Abraham, on his own understanding, recognized the one Creator, and that's when the Creator revealed Himself to him. So that's like what Judaism is based on.
Gotcha. So in that way, you guys are kind of, because from my understanding of Islam, the most important principle that they have is something called Tawheed, which is like the ultimate singular nature of God. That's very interesting that you guys like kind of have that as like the prime premise of the nature of God.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, yeah, that's pretty much what Judaism is, monotheism. I mean, it's from Abraham. I guess Abraham also had Ishmael, which officially is the ancestor of the Arabs. So, yeah, it makes sense that they would have a similar idea.
Well, I mean, the Arabs were notorious. So, I mean, when Islam came around, I'm a history major, so that's all I study. Before the coming of Islam, they were mostly pagan with a couple of Jewish and Christian tribes, but the Christian tribes were mostly held to the coast. There were numerous Jewish tribes throughout Arabia, but the vast majority of the Arabs were pagans and had a worship the pantheon of gods. So would it be like of the Jewish opinion that someone going from pagan to Muslim would be better than someone going to like pagan versus, let's say, like Christian, because of the fact, because like that the monotheism associated with Islam?
Arguably, yeah, I would say so, because I mean, there's a concept in Judaism of the 7 Noahide laws. So, like, the Jews were given certain laws by the Creator, but we also believe that the Creator gave certain laws to Moses at Mount Sinai for other humans that are not Jews. Like the 7 basic universal laws of morality, and that includes not worshiping idols, which includes like knowing that there's one God, one Creator. And to the best of my knowledge, Islam is the only religion besides for Judaism that actually has similar, if not the same, idea of God. They have different writings. We don't agree with their prophet at all. But I mean, regarding their idea of what God is, it would be compatible with these 7 laws of universal morality that all humans are obligated to keep. So yeah, I guess
that makes sense. Could I ask on what grounds? Because I know within Judaism, you guys have numerous prophets, right? So on what grounds would Muhammad or Jesus or whatever other prophets that come after, would you guys disqualify them as having revelation from God?
Well, the primary reason, besides being not accepted by the rabbis, and the Torah says listen to the rabbis, but I mean, one of the foundations of what a prophet is the prophet will never add or take away laws from the Torah. So even if someone does miracles, even if they come back from the dead, or even if they like fly in the air or whatever, but if they ever tell anyone that a commandment of the Torah no longer applies, or if they say that even one letter of the Torah was not given by the Creator, then we know absolutely that they are a false prophet, just on that basis alone.
I see. That makes sense. But from my understanding, the Torah as we have it, what is like the foundational, like the original transcripts that we have, or manuscripts that we have of the Torah that the Jews have? I know the Dead Sea Scrolls are a very old manuscript, but they were recently found. So like, what was the original manuscript that the Jewish tradition has been using throughout the years, based off of?
Well, it's not based off manuscripts. The Torah tradition is based off the original Torah that Moses wrote and gave to millions of Jewish people to pass down. I mean, the Torah. First of all, how we know Judaism is true at all, besides for the Torah itself, but we know Judaism is true because the Creator Himself, not just because we believe in Moses, but because the Creator Himself revealed Himself to millions of eyewitnesses at Mount Sinai. With fire, lightning, millions of angels, and the Creator personally spoke to every of each of those millions of people individually, internalizing Himself with each and every one. And He spoke in Hebrew, shattering cedar trees. It was a mass revelation that millions of people saw. So it's not just something we're believing in someone else, but we know Judaism is true because the Creator Himself revealed Himself and told us to listen to Moses. And Moses himself wrote 13 Torah scrolls, gave one to each tribe, and every time another Torah scroll is written, it can only be written if they have another Torah scroll for reference where they actually have to read every word from every other Torah scroll, say it out loud, and then write down that word on the other Torah scroll. There's no other way that a Torah can ever be written. So throughout original time, we've always had the exact same Torah passed down from these millions of people who copied that Torah and then word for word, and then they copied it and shared. And all throughout the world, the Jews have been scattered for centuries throughout the world, but all the Torahs that they have are exactly the same, word for word.
I see. But so when was this happening exactly? This was like pretty long time ago, right?
Yeah, the original mass revelation on Mount Sinai was 3,336 years ago, plus a couple months and milliseconds.
So the one objection I would have with that would be with the numbers you quoted, because like millions would be like to have a population of millions within the Levant at that time. We have no historical basis for that. At its very peak, Rome had 1.5 million people in it within like one of the most developed countries on the planet. So, like, are you sure about it being like millions of people?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, everything that happened in the story of the Exodus was miraculous. The Jewish people went down to Egypt with 70 people, and then 210 years later, that 70 people turned into at least 2 or 3 million people, approximately, because of the miraculous birth rate. Families would have tons of. I mean, this was how the Egyptian slavery happened in the first place, because the Jews were miraculously multiplying like no other precedent before. It was a miraculous event, the fact that they increased from 70 to millions within like less than 200 years or so.
I see, but it would be hard to imagine that Rome would have been able to. That means that they would have essentially been as large of an empire and as a group of people as Rome at the time.
Yeah, I mean, they conquered Canaan, 7 nations. They conquered them all, and yeah, they did a lot of stuff. Not only that, they conquered these huge other countries from Sichon and Og. Sichon, it says, was the strongest warrior at the time. It says even if he was the only soldier and with the city had no other defenses, no other group would be able to defeat it. And the city he was in, it says, even if it had even one fly guarding it, based on the security of the walls, no one else would have been able to conquer it. But the Jewish people conquered it, basically. So yeah.
I see. I'd be interested. Is that the numbers from the Torah itself?
Yeah, the book of Numbers, believe it or not. I mean, it says 600,000 adult males from the ages of 20 to 60, but that does not include the women, their wives, and the children they had, which is, I mean, everyone probably was married at least to one, if not multiple wives, and had at least one, if not multiple kids. So that alone is already multi-million.
Oh,
so, yeah.
so back then, is polygamy allowed within Judaism?
Technically, by strict Torah law, it's allowed. But there was a decree made 1,000 years ago for Ashkenazi Jews specifically, like, which is translated as like German Jews, but not necessarily German, but like the more like German area Jews who have different customs than other Jews to only have one life. But the other kinds of Jews technically are allowed to. I mean, as long as someone has enough money to support them. And other people, besides for Jews, Gentiles, are allowed to have them. I don't think there's any restrictions. I mean, a man can have multiple wives, but not the other way around. But yeah.
I see. So wait, but I remember you said earlier though that additional like laws beyond the Torah are set like by nature against the Torah. So wouldn't that decree you mentioned 1,000 years ago kind of be invalid?
So this is what's discussed by the Maimonides, that there's different kinds of Torah law. There's some laws that were given by the Creator to Moses, which are never debatable. Other types of laws were given to Moses in order for the Jewish court to decide what the law is. And then those laws are also considered laws of the Torah that cannot be changed through prophecy, but they could be changed by a later court through specific legal methods, and only if that later court is greater than the first court. But prophecy alone can never change a law. This is the second category of laws. Certain laws where the Creator himself said the law in an ambiguous way that left room for interpretation, and then he said, okay, I'm letting this Jewish court of 70 judges decide what this law is going to mean. And then once they decide through these specific legal means that I'm going to tell them, then I'm going to agree that that's the law. Until a greater court will later come and use other legal methods to change it in certain circumstances. But then there's a third type of law called decrees, which are not part of the Torah law, which these are laws that the Torah itself allows rabbis to make, not as part of the actual Torah, but in order to make a fence around the Torah, to help people stay away from sins, which are not considered actual Torah laws. These are considered laws made by the rabbis itself. But the Torah itself allows the rabbis to make decrees. It says in the book of Deuteronomy, around 16, I think, maybe earlier, but it says that anything that, if you ever have a question in the Torah, in the Torah law, you should go up to this place in Jerusalem and listen to this court of rabbis and listen to anything they say. So essentially, the Torah says like to listen to this court. And they also have the ability to make certain decrees around the Torah, but those decrees are not part of the Torah law itself. and they can never be made or taken away through prophecy alone. Only legal
So,
knowledge.
how did these rabbis obtain authority? Because I don't there hasn't always been like a centralized Jewish church, has there been?
Well, not church, but there has been, not a church, but in the times of Moshe, there was 70 elders that Hashem, the Creator, said, okay, the Creator told Moses, take for me, this is in the book of Numbers, he says, take for me 70 elders from the children of Israel, and I will take the spirit that is on you, that is on Moshe, and I will place it onto them. And this court became the original Supreme Court of Judaism that was appointed by the Creator himself from the same spirit of Moshe that emanated to them. And this court was given certain divine authorities to decide, to make new decrees and to decide certain Torah laws under certain circumstances. And this court would continue. When one person would pass away, they would appoint another judge who was from lesser courts to take their place. And this cycle went on continuously, like what this court would keep appointing new people until at least 1,500 years later, or actually a little bit more, until the times of the Talmud. And then it got disbanded when the Jewish people were dispersed out the world. But they still appointed certain agents to act as their representatives. Because those agents don't have the same legal authority, but they still have some kind of legal authority to decide laws until the Messiah comes, when there's going to be the court that comes back. But the rabbis that exist today are essentially an extension of those agents that the court appointed when they became disbanded.
I see. So within the Torah, how do you differentiate between those three types of laws that you mentioned? The ones where there's ambiguity, or one where the rabbis are allowed to have their own decrees, versus the ones that are set in stone? Like how are they differentiated between each other?
I mean, they're all passed down through tradition. There's 613 primary commandments of the Torah. And within those 613 commandments, there's different laws of how to keep those commandments. And some of those laws were either passed down directly from the Creator to Moses, say it has to be this way, no other way, while some of the details of those laws were decided by the Jewish court under the divine authority. So only the 613 commandments are the actual Torah laws, either explained directly by the Creator or elaborated on by the Jewish court. Only those 613. And then anything else that are not part of those very specific 613 mitzvahs, which are mentioned explicitly in the Torah, meaning in order for something to be one of these mitzvahs, it has to be either mentioned explicitly in a Torah verse or directly implied, such that it can't mean anything else. But it's a direct reference in the actual written Torah, while other laws are things that are not part of the Torah at all. But the rabbis are saying this is not from the Torah, but this is part of the court's authority to distance people from sin. So we're making things such that it would be harder for people to sin if we do this. But that itself is still part of a separate commandment. One of the 613 commandments is to listen to the decisions of the Jewish court when they make those decisions.
I see. It's very interesting. It's very interesting how you could see like the elements. It reminds me very much of like legal documents and like government in a sense. The way the wording and and how like the capacity for change, like leaving like a door in for amendments. It's very interesting. It seems like law, as we have it in like a municipal sense, is very similar to Jewish law.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of the laws in America I think they're based on it. I mean, the verse in the book of Exodus that says like you should make like heads of tens, heads of hundreds, etc. for the courts and judges. I'm pretty sure American court systems were based on that verse, but I'm not certain. But yeah.
Well, that makes sense. Well, that's interesting to know. I appreciate your time. I'll come back if I ever have any more questions. Thank you.
Yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Now I'm left with nothing to talk about. Yeah, anyone else want to request up? Because now I'm kind of left on my own, just doing random monologues about different stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's up to you. Because if you don't come up, then we're just going to sit in awkward silence for a long time. So what were we actually talking about? That is the real question before the guest came. Does anyone remember what we were talking about? I like awkward silence. You guys could come up as a guest if you want to break the silence. What were we talking about? We talked about oh my gosh, I can't even remember. Oh yeah, because we talked about the feasts. Hey Russell, do you want to come up? The feasts. Any thoughts on the Parsha this week? Yes, the Parsha this week. Parshas Tetzei, when you go out to war on your enemies. and the Creator will give them into your hands. Are you Jewish? In the comments, yes, I identify as Jewish, and I actually am Jewish, believe it or not. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I mean the parsha, it's a partial parsha. It's an intense parsha basically about the war. When the Jewish people go out to war, and Hashem will give the enemy into our hands. I guess it's pretty relevant for the modern day war. My phone crashed, so those of you who still stayed this entire time, which I'm not sure if it's anyone, 8 people stayed this entire time while it was paused. That is pretty impressive. So, yeah, I mean, I'm impressed. Well, I actually identify as impressed. Yeah, so, I mean, someone said to talk about this week's parsha. Yeah, this week's parsha talks about when the Jewish people are going to war, and Hashem will give the enemy into their hands, which is relevant for the modern era. That really the war that we do is dependent on Hashem, and we want Hashem to give the enemy into our hands. It's very important for it to happen. So that's one relation of the parsha to modern events. And as someone mentioned in the comments, there's 73 mitzvos in this week's parsha, which is a lot of mitzvahs, believe it or not. And yeah, basically, does anyone want to come up as a guest or something? They could come up because I just like talking about random stuff. Maybe we'll just like start reading through this parsha until someone gets bored enough to actually come up and talk about something. So Parshas, where it says Parshas Ki Seitzei, it's called. It says when you go out. It's in the book of Deuteronomy, essentially. And every day of the week, it says there's a custom to learn a certain part of the parsha, just a partial part of it. This custom was made by actually goes back a long time in Judaism, but it was made publicized a lot by the Lubavitch Rebbe's father-in-law, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, said that every Jew should do it, and I'm not sure even non-Jews if it might be a good thing to do. Probably is. But yeah, so I would encourage everyone. So every parsha of the Torah is divided into 7 sections. When the Jewish people read the Torah in the synagogues, there's 7 people get called up to read the Torah, plus another 8, but that's another issue. But the point is, each of the sections of the Torah that the Jews read every week on Saturday is divided into 7 parts. So during the week before Sabbath starts, there's a custom to read each of those 7 parts on that day of the week that it corresponds to, because believe it or not, there are 7 days of the week. So each parsha has 7 parts, each week has 7 days, so whatever number day of the week it is, then there's a custom to read that part of it. So today is Thursday, which is the 5th day of the week, if you count from Sunday. So maybe we'll just read like one verse from it. This is in Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 25. It says, when you enter your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat as many grapes as you desire, until you are sated, but you shall not put any into your vessel. It says this is talking about a worker, someone who's hired to work in someone's fields, or someone's vineyard specifically, and I think other places as well. They're hired to like pick grapes and stuff, that sometimes they'll get hungry in the job, or they might get like something, I don't know, hungry or maybe irritated. So the Torah permits them to actually eat some of the grapes that they're picking, even though they don't actually belong to him, because the Torah gives them to him in order so that the worker should be able to continue working. But he's not allowed to put the grapes away in like a bag and then carry them home, because that would just be like cheating pretty much. So yeah, that's one verse, because I said one verse, so I'm only going to do one. But anyone who wants to continue reading it on their own, they could. In addition to learning part of the Chumash, part of the Torah, there's also part of a custom to learn a bit of the book of the Tanya, which was the foundation book of the Chabad philosophy. What would be the one for tomorrow? Well, one for today starts in Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 25, and you can find that on chabad.org/daily study. And then you could look every day. They have exactly which part of the Torah you could read from on that website. Essentially, we're in the book of Deuteronomy now, approaching the end. We're about to finish the Torah in about a month, a month plus a few days. We're going to finish the entire Torah, and that's pretty intense. So we're getting towards the end. So yeah, anyone could look up if they want on Chabad, chabad.org/daily study, and then they have all those different tracks Anyone who wants to come up as a guest to ask any questions is more. Is Chabad an acronym? Yes, it is. It stands for the Hebrew letters Chachma, which means wisdom, and then the next Hebrew word is Bina, so Chab, so far we got through, and then the Da, which is, or an odd, because Hebrew, like, there's no vowels, but Chabad, first Chachma, wisdom, then we have Bina, understanding, and then Das, which is knowledge. And, I mean, it sounds like the same thing. What's the difference between wisdom, understanding, and knowledge? Just, like, thinking about stuff. But there's differences, and Chabad explains what the differences are, essentially. Rashi in the Torah explains these phrases. It says these phrases first appear in the book of Exodus when it talks about the person Bitzalel, who was appointed by the Creator and Moshe to, by the Creator, who told Moses, to help to build the tabernacle, which was a temporary structure to house the Ark of the Covenant that had the tablets inside of it. And it says when he built this tabernacle, he didn't just build it like with hammers and nails, but he built it with all kinds of Kabbalistic energies and stuff. And it says in order to build it with all this spiritual power, he had to have wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, using the same Hebrew words, pretty much. And Rashi says, the commentary to Rashi says that Chachma, wisdom, refers to the knowledge one has attained, the information that one has attained. While Bina, understanding, means the ability to derive new knowledge from the knowledge one already has. And then he translates Das, knowledge, as Ruach HaKodesh, which translates to the Holy Spirit, which means like a certain spirit of prophecy. In the Hasidic philosophy, it elaborates that the knowledge is like a deeper connection to an idea. One can understand it through wisdom and understanding, meaning one can understand wisdom as like the basic idea of what the idea is, like the basic synopsis of what the idea is actually saying. While Bina is understanding is like deriving sub-ideas from that main idea to elaborate on it in great depth and elaboration. But both of these things are intellectual ways of connecting with an idea. They're just raw intellect. But Das, knowledge, really means like when someone actually connects to it with their emotions. But it's still part of their mind, meaning they use their mind to create like an intense connection with the actual main point of the idea until it actually becomes relevant to them, and then that gives life force to the rest of their emotions, and that affects their how they could like love and fear the Creator, and how they could do acts of kindness. But the idea is first, knowledge is not just understanding something intellectually, but actually internalizing it and realizing what the main point is, making it relevant. When should one study Zohar, not Tanya? Generally, it's recommended after learning Torah for 40 years. People say after turning 40. Some people say it refers to only if someone has actually been learning Torah for 40 years, including the Talmud, etc. So it depends. If someone is learning Zohar with like a Chabad commentary, usually they could do it earlier, to the best of my knowledge. Oh wow, heart emoji. Yes, wow, indeed. Oh wow, welcome. Here you are. It's a miracle. It's still loading, actually, so the miracle is intense. Hi, welcome. Welcome back. It's been a long time. Can you actually speak or hear me? I'll take that as a maybe.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, I can. Thanks for coming on. It's been a couple days.
Oh.
Nice. How are you?
How about now? Can you hear me?
I hear you. I heard you the whole time. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Oh, there's no feedback. I can hear. Now I can hear you. I had to turn my Wi-Fi off.
I hear.
I've been
cool.
very much enjoying your lives.
Oh, that's cool. You've been seeing them on YouTube?
The one you posted on YouTube now.
Oh, no. Oh, the one you just saw.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was from earlier today. That's cool.
Yeah, with nice. I liked it. I liked what Joshua had to say about the essence of reality and how we're all one with it. I was surprised that as the author of the Awtsmoos channel, you didn't have more to say on that. You are the Awtsmoos.
I know, maybe I should have elaborated. The author of Awtsmoos.com. Yeah.
You want to elaborate now? What is Awtsmoos? Like, what's the background to this to the name of this account?
Oh, what is Awtsmoos? That is the $1 billion question.
That's a big question.
Yeah, even more than $1 billion. Awtsmoos,
It's everything.
everything. Yes, at least.
It's
What
everything dollars.
is the real question? The, the literal translation of Awtsmoos means the Hebrew word for bones, like the bones of a person's body. But in Kabbalah, it metaphorically refers to the essence and the core of the Creator, which is the foundation of all reality. Just like the bones of a person are the foundation of that person, so the Awtsmoos, the foundation of all existence. It says nothing can exist without the Awtsmoos constantly bringing it into existence every second. This is alluded to in the Maimonides, the beginning of the laws of the foundations of the Torah. It says it's the foundation of foundations and the pillar of wisdoms, to know that there's a first existence, that from it all other existences exist, and nothing else can exist in the heavens and the earth except for everything that exists in the heavens and the earth and everything between them only exists from the truth of his being. So the phrase truth of his being implies the Awtsmoos, as it's explained. And some people say it means like, oh, it doesn't mean that everything is actually a revelation of the essence. It means that maybe everything is similar, is like from the Creator, but it itself is like a separate existence. But no. In Chassidus, and specifically, the Rebbe explained that Rambam as saying that the Rebbe in a talk in 5726, which was 1966, I believe, he quoted this Rambam, but he changed the language a little bit to explain how it's really how it really means that everything is the Awtsmoos, not just from the Awtsmoos, but actually is an expression of the Awtsmoos directly. The Rambam himself said that everything that exists only exists from the truth of his being, which implies, okay, it's from it, but is it actually it? But he changed, when the Rebbe quotes it, he changes the language. He says that the true existence of every existence is itself the truth of his being, which is different, but it explains what it's really saying, that really the truth of everything is literally from the Awtsmoos, essentially.
That's awesome. I to me, when it's said in plain English, it's just so on its face. Like it just leaves you with nothing else to say, because if you're basically saying everything is what it is, and either you reveal what it actually is or you're in the illusion of what it is, and then the more you connect through the commandments and through all these things, the more you connect to what things actually are as opposed to what they seem like they are. So I don't know if that's an accurate translation of what some of these talks are saying, but I find that fascinating. I also think what's not spoken about as much, but is so much of the Chabad teachings, is the subjective experience of how a person's experience of God and of everything around them changes as they. Are we getting Awtsmoos' eyes there? As they continue to advance and do all these things. So it's like I think the one thing that, correct me if I'm wrong, I think one of the things that it says about Awtsmoos is that everything is technically part of the Awtsmoos, but whether or not it's revealed is a big question. And so the revelation happens within yourself. Like, are you going to live life without the revelation of Awtsmoos or with it? And when it comes to revelations, there's infinite levels to revelation, which is another subject. But I just think that whole category, that whole topic doesn't get talked about enough. Like, it's always about the law or about the scripture or about commandments, which is obviously very important. But so little of it is about the person's own subjective experience of growth.
Yeah,
Craig, yeah. I know it's abstract. You got to be in it to understand it.
Yeah, I hear. I mean, we could talk about it. Yeah, I mean, we could talk about it, I guess. But yeah, I mean, in the Rebbe's talks, it's talked about like pretty much all the time. The Awtsmoos is mentioned like as the main subject.
Yeah, clearly he's obsessed with the revelation of Awtsmoos. It's not just the Awtsmoos; it's the revelation of Awtsmoos, which corresponds to the fifth dimension of the soul. Am I correct there?
Yes, that's correct.
So what are the 5 dimensions, or what are the 4 main dimensions, and then what's the 5th dimension?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I wonder where you've heard it before. Or the ideas. Yeah, so it says in a Kabbalah, and actually not even Kabbalah, in the Talmud, in the Midrash, it says that there are 5 names that are called that the soul is called. And these are names that are mentioned throughout Scripture. And based on those different scriptural passages, it says that the 5 names are, one is called a nephesh, and we'll translate it later, but essentially these are just different words that mean soul, but different kinds of the soul. So different names for what the soul of a person is. There's nephesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, and yechida. The nephesh, so in the Midrash, it just says that there's 5 different names because these 5 different references throughout Scripture, but it doesn't say that the different names correspond to different dimensions of the soul. It just says that the same soul is called by 5 names. But in the Arizal and other Kabbalah, it explains that these 5 names are not just names, but they actually correspond to 5 different dimensions of the soul, one on top of the other. And then it explains throughout different sources what they are. And essentially, this is also elaborated, by the way, coincidentally, in the same exact talk that I referenced earlier, in the same gathering from the 1966 on the 19th day of Kislev, when the Rebbe quoted the Rambam saying that everything is actually the Awtsmoos. Right before that, in the same gathering, when he said that, he also said this other talk, which is known as which was later published in a packet called the Packet regarding the idea of Chassidus, explaining what Chassidus is. And when doing that, it explains these levels of the soul. It says that nefesh refers to the bare minimum life force, I don't even know actually. I don't know if it's specifically the blood or just the bare minimum life. What gives someone actual physical life? What makes someone alive? What's the actual life itself? Usually associated with the power of action, possibly other stuff, but I'm pretty sure it's just in general, it says a person has a brain, a heart, and a liver, and the other parts of it correspond to the brain and the heart. So I'm guessing nefesh might correspond to the liver, but I'm not sure about that. But I'm pretty sure something like that. The point is nefesh corresponds to the bare minimum life force that's in a person, while the next one, ruach, means spirit, and that refers to the heart and emotions that someone has, and also understanding that someone could have, because it says understanding is really from the heart. Different kinds of understanding, but a certain kind of emotional understanding, where someone becomes emotionally connected to an idea, is with the heart as well. So all the emotions that someone experiences is essentially the ruach, while the neshama is associated with the brain, the power of a divine intellect. And I'm pretty sure the nefesh is the liver, based on that. But then, so again, the nefesh, basic life force, then the ruach is the emotions and the feelings that someone has, and associated with the heart, while the neshama is associated with the brain. And then there's the chaya, which means literally life force. That refers to an aspect of the soul that is not actually in the body, but rather remains in the spiritual worlds where the soul came from, and it looks down upon the soul in the body and sends it messages and guides it and gives it certain energy to guide it in its way. Essentially, before the soul came down, it was all in the spiritual worlds. And then when the soul came down into this world, only part of the soul came down, but not the entire soul. Some of it remained in the spiritual universes. And that part that remains is looking down at the rest of the soul from above. Sometimes someone will have random sparks of inspiration that come out of nowhere, and they don't really know why someone is inspired. All of a sudden just decide to go to synagogue, or just realize what am I doing with my life? This is from the chaya. This is from the part of the soul that remains in the spiritual worlds, and sometimes sends messages to the rest of the soul in the body. So the nefesh, ruach, neshama, the bare life force, heart and brain, intellect and emotions, those are actually inside of the physical body itself, while the chaya is in the spiritual worlds, and it's also associated with surrounding the body a little bit. So essentially, is this making sense so far?
Are you asking your chat?
Maybe. What's the difference?
Well, I mean, we've had these discussions many times, and I've also been studying this a lot. I feel like, based on your comments when you just started the chat, do you feel like I don't give you enough credit for the stuff that we learned together? Is that something that you were alluding to? Is that what you were saying?
What do you mean? Oh, yeah, the stuff that we learned together. Maybe. No, it's
okay.
good. No, just
all right. Well, just say it if you did. But
no,
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Nice.
Then there's the
I like
Ida.
and the Yechida, yeah. Well, these are also all parts of not just the, when you think of a random person having a random soul, but I think the soul and the person that we're most familiar with is our own self and our own soul. And if a lot of this stuff sounds like mumbo jumbo, it could be because the individual listening has only accessed the first primary levels of their soul. And within each of us, just like in the material world around us, there's rocks and plants and animals and humans. There's this sort of evolution, if you want to use that term, of types of species and creation around us. Within ourself, it's said that we have all of those things within ourselves. So we contain the physical bones, which is like rocks, and we contain an animal, things that grow, the muscle matter, or whatever you want to say. And then, so we have within ourselves all aspects of creation, and part of creation that is not as observed until we're ready for it are the spiritual aspects of creation. But then as a person grows, especially through keeping Torah mitzvahs or commandments, or mostly really doing righteous deeds. So when a person gives charity or a person helps out someone less fortunate than themselves, with a lot of humility. So, if sometimes it's easy to help someone, that's really not necessarily going to give us the most bang for the buck. But if it's something that's a difficult thing for us to help another person and we overcome that challenge, then that potentially unlocks deeper levels within the soul within ourselves. And that gives us access to higher worlds, which one of the people in your chat was given the whole rundown on. Elif. He wants to get up here. So he was given the levels of the soul.
Should we bring him up? We had him before,
Yeah,
but
let's go for it.
yeah, all right. Hopefully it won't get so out of hand. Oh, he's not even here anymore. Brutal.
All right.
All good.
But yeah, it's interesting stuff. And then that final one that you didn't get to talk about was the Yechida, which seems to be the pinnacle experience of all of this. You go up the ladder high enough through the Chaya, through the Yechida, which is connected to the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. Maybe you could talk about that. Achia Shiloni is explained to be Chaya Yechida, who was his teacher. So when a person accesses the revelation of Eliyahu, is another description of that experience. So a person has all these experiences where they're taught Torah from a heavenly realm, and then everything that's taught about in the Torah opens up to be much more deeper than what it seems like on the surface. All of a sudden, there's all these sort of allegories going on about the levels of the soul and the journey of the soul. And we have over here Awtsmoos, who's not going to say about himself. He's a bit of a spiritual master. He'll unveil more aspects for us.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. So, yeah, pretty much. So just all kinds of different levels and stuff. Yeah. So, where were we? Is a question.
We get lost.
Should we talk about the Yechida?
Let's talk about the Yechida.
Yeah. And then we could have more guests on. And anyone who wants to join and have any questions, they could join. I'm just going to finish the explanation of the Yechida, then maybe I'll invite some people. So all these four different parts, again, for those of us just joining, are the different parts of the soul, according to the Midrash. So one is the Nefesh, the basic life force, possibly the liver associated with that. Then there's the Ruach, the spirit, which is the emotions of a person in the heart. Then there's the Neshama, which is associated with the brain and deeper intellectual capacity. And then there's the Chaya, the life force, which is a part. So all these other three parts are the part of the soul that's in the physical body itself. But then there's a part of the soul in the Kabbalah called the Chaya, the life force, which is a part of the soul that's in the spiritual worlds, and it's looking down on the rest of the soul in the body and sending it different messages to get closer to the Creator. But all these, so the Chaya is not in the body, it's like, so to speak, above the body in the spiritual worlds, and it's also sometimes associated with being like surrounding the body, whatever that means. But the point is, they're all limitations, essentially. They're all like, even though the Chaya is like in a really high space, that looking down the soul, but it's still associated in some kind of limitation, because it's only the spiritual worlds, but not really everywhere. But then there's the Yechida, which means the exact translation. I'm trying to think of an exact. I don't know. It means like the unity, the unified,
the singularity.
What is it? The singularity. That's a good one. Yeah, it says the singularity, the single one, the singleness, singularity that's united with the singular one, who is the Creator, which is the essence the core of the soul, which is united with the core of the Creator, the essence of the Creator, which is called Awtsmoos, which is found in literally everything. And that's essentially the root of the soul. And when one unlocks the root of the soul, then they can reveal the Creator and everything. And that essentially, different ways of doing it, through learning Chassidus, doing Torah and mitzvahs. And there's a lot written about the Yechida, but essentially the Yechida has the power to like fix all problems, fill up all blemishes, etc. And that's united with the Awtsmoos, which is the essence of the Creator.
So it sounds like the purpose of the creation is for one person at least, or for us to find a way to unlock the Yechida, because you're saying that solves all the problems.
Makes sense. And dollars. Yeah, I mean, that's what Mashiach, when the Messiah comes, it says Mashiach is the general Yechida, that he has, his soul is what includes all of the other Yechida sparks that are in everyone else. And when everyone brings out their own Yechida, that will reveal the general soul of Mashiach, of the Messiah, and that will bring redemption to the whole world. Hi, welcome, person, Muslim rationalist.
Hey,
nice to
how
meet
you doing?
Excellent, excellent. Nice to see you. Have you met
No,
before? I don't
no,
remember.
this is my first time here.
All right, cool, cool. Well,
Interesting
nice to have you.
topic. Yeah, I'm just listening.
Okay.
A
Yeah, I
lot
invited
of it
you on
sounds familiar
in case you have
I
any
come
questions.
from the Islamic tradition, which kind of ripped off a lot of the Jewish tradition. So it sounds familiar in a funny way because we took it from you guys, you know.
Is it Sufism? Can I ask?
What's that?
Are you from a Sufi background, or?
Not particularly from a Sunni background, and Sufism is kind of something that came about a little later, and they kind of created even more mythology and kind of went a little deeper.
Mm,
But that's mixed in there. Yeah.
gotcha. Cool. Yeah. Well, if we're all, yeah. Sorry,
Interesting.
Jacob, your chat.
No, go ahead. No, just saying yes or no. Go ahead. I just said interesting. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I don't really get so caught up in people ripping off things. You know, the truth is the truth. Where it gets, you know, I think the only issue is if there's a larger, you know, I don't know how to say it, a larger picture involved, and someone grasps a smaller part of the picture and gets very excited about that, but then wants to cut themselves off from the rest of the picture. That's where it, can get problematic. But other than that, I don't think there's a, truth is universal.
Yeah, that's nice. That sounds like a Sufi type of view. Are you guys coming from like kind of like a Kabbalah type of background?
I'm a little bit more free spirited in where I would take my influences, and I like to just seek truth as it comes to me. But I've studied a lot with Awtsmoos here, and it's strictly the Chabad teachings.
Yeah, in Judaism, there's different parts of the Torah explanation. There's like the simple meaning of the Torah, then there's the laws of the Torah in the Talmud, and then there's the Midrash, which is like other stories that are about the context of the Torah. Then there's the Kabbalah, and all these levels, these four levels correspond to the four levels of the soul that we just mentioned, and they're all given by the Creator to Moshe himself and Mount Sinai, essentially. So we believe that Kabbalah is definitely divine according to Judaism. Am I allowing others in? Yes, but it depends who they are, at least. Should I bring in this elite person?
I'll say
Who had
one
some
thing
issues
that I
before?
think is
Like,
interesting. There's so Awtsmoos said that the Torah can be read at multiple dimensions. There's like the inner aspect and the inner aspect and the illusions. I think that's something that's potentially pretty unique to Torah. I think it's pretty unique to Torah, especially because there's this idea of the afterlife of Gan Eden, of the Garden of Eden, which obviously is the physical place in history where Adam and Eve were, but then it's also in the Kabbalah, a state of consciousness where a person is cleaving to something from outside of the physical world. It's like this heavenly delight that's a garden. And in that garden, the tree of life is the Torah. And so a lot of Jews study Torah their whole life, like especially Orthodox Jews will be studying day and night, Torah, Talmud, Mishnah, the Tanakh itself. And they're preparing to enter into this garden, because when they enter into the garden, then the Torah flower opens up like a flower and all the deep secrets come out. And it's the most pleasurable thing in the world. Like they say, like one moment of pleasure of that is better than an entire lifetime of chasing any physical pleasure in this world. And there are also, righteous people that experience that in their lifetime itself. It doesn't need to only happen after a person passes on. Passing on can either be after a person's life, or it can be after they are done with the physical life in this world, but their bodies are still alive, but they've given up on all physicality, and so now they're able to enter into this heavenly realm, and so they go there with their Torah, and all these secrets come out, and then they come back and they teach their students. Throughout history, we have had Jewish sages that have done that, and some of the deepest secrets come from there.
Yeah. Does that make sense? I don't know if you heard it. I guess. Yeah. It's good. Yeah, pretty much. So, yeah, were you referencing the part of the Mishnah that says that one moment of spiritual bliss in the world to come is greater than all life of this
that
world,
and Ashrei Mishabela comes
Yeah.
with the Beyado, other similar.
Yeah, if you came here to spiritual world with his, or to the messianic world as well, with the learning in his hand. Yeah. And then, so the Mishnah says in the Pirkei Avos, top part of the Talmud, that it says that even one moment of spiritual bliss in the world to come, which implies the spiritual world as well as after people will be resurrected in the future time in this world and have a lot of spiritual delight. Even one moment of that is greater than all of the life in this physical world, which we'll explain what that means in a second. But then it says afterwards, it says, and then even one moment of teshuvah, of returning to the Creator and good deeds in this world is greater than all of the life in the world to come. So the second statement is a lot greater than the first. Does that make any sense so far? Or maybe I lost people.
I'm not so worried. I think it's profound things, sometimes. Nice to meet you, Muslim rationalism.
Yeah.
I think one of the other things that's very interesting is that, speaking of Kabbalists, there was a Kabbalist named Chaim Vital, who was the main student of the Arizal, who's considered like the ultimate Kabbalist in modern day Judaism. And his main student that is who we have all the works from, his name is Chaim Vital. So this Chaim Vital, master Kabbalist, who considered himself the Messiah, he considered his teacher the Messiah, the son of Joseph, which is like a predecessor of the Messiah, and then he considered himself the Messiah of the generation. And I think it's widely accepted that he was, yeah.
Really?
And he has a book called Gates of Holiness, where he describes the journey of a person trying to become more holy and cleaving to God, and the different levels of revelations that happen. So it stems from a verse going back to, Awtsmoos, you know the sources better than I do, I think, but it stems from a verse that says, first comes cleanliness and zealousness and strictness and all these different, ethical, moral attributes that a person picks up as they're becoming holier. And that's the first stage. And then comes isolation and devotion and prayer and repentance. And so that's kind of like a second stage in a person's personal journey of trying to cleave to the divine. But then afterwards, he describes these stages of the revelation of Elijah the prophet, the Messiah, and the revival of the dead. And he makes it seem from his book that these are not just stages in human history, but these are stages within a person's own soul of their own development. And that if a person merits to go through this whole journey, they can reach the revival of the dead, they can reach the soul of Messiah. And so it's very interesting that there's this parallel between the human soul capacity to reach these high levels of holiness and what we say about human history and where things are heading to, that there's this parallel going on. I think that's very interesting.
This is in Shari Kedusha. It implies that it's like the levels of the journey of a person's soul.
Yeah, because Shari Kedusha are all the different Sharim of Kedusha. So the earlier ones are just very common, right? Right in the intro, he says, you have 613 limbs and Mevarim, in the body. Basically, your body is made up of 613 parts if you calculate it in a certain way. And that reflects the 613 commandments. And so the idea of doing all the 613 commandments is essentially to rectify the human body. that your entire body, and we just said earlier that a person there's 4 souls within the body. So you have to first correct your material self, like all your physical temptations, your physical drives, all your physicality, and then you have to correct your emotional self, and that means healing, and that means overcoming negative emotional character traits or finding the right balance. Like the Lubavitcher Rebbe has a fantastic talk on this, where he says, a person could be kind whole life, which kindness is a very strong virtue, but they didn't fully achieve what they're supposed to achieve, like we see with Abraham, where he had to bind his son Isaac, which is the opposite of kindness. Because Abraham is known as being this kind person, and that's why he's the friend of God, and that's why God reveals himself. But God tests him to see, are you being kind just because that's your nature? You were born to be a kind person, or are you being kind to serve me? And if it's to serve me, then you should also be able to serve me with the opposite of kindness. So anyhow, the point is that this rectification process happens on the physical self, on the emotional self, and then on the intellectual self. You have to sift through all your ideas and make sure you throw out the bad ones and keep the good ones, and keep studying and keep building up the fullness of your intellectual capacity. And that's the rectification of the intellectual soul. And then a person begins to rectify their spiritual soul. And that's what he's describing in the later gates of isolation and devotion and prayer. And it's called entering the house of God. Like when King David writes, I want to be in the house of God all the days of my life, he's not just talking about his physical body that he misses being by the temple, even though the temple wasn't even made yet. It wasn't built yet, exactly. So what he's referring to is the spiritual state, that when a person enters it, first of all allegories in the Torah immediately reveal themselves. Once you enter into the house of God, the secrets of the Torah are shown to you, because you've proven yourself worthy of knowing its secrets. But then, once you're there, in order to be there, he says, who can climb my holy mountain? Who can climb the holy mountain? Whoever has clean hands and a pure heart. So he's basically saying, in order to be in this sacred space where all the secrets are shown to you and you're in God's presence, in order for you to be there, you have to have clean hands and a pure heart. You can't have done anything wrong that you haven't done repentance of. And you have a pure heart. You can't have any malice, impure intentions, arrogance, all of these, wounds on the heart that need to be healed. And then when that happens, then you could remain in the house of God. And so he's in Shari Kedusha, this Chaim Vital, the Messiah of that generation, who's describing this process. He basically says, there's a few more stages after that even, which is the revelation of the soul of Elijah. And he describes what that's like, which a person studies in the Mor Torah, and they have what's called the Kesser, which is this part of the human experience that's usually very hidden, but then sometimes it gets revealed, and it's this kind of sensation right above the crown of a person's head, on top of their brain. And it could happen obviously on the physical body, but more likely it's the spiritual crown of a person gets opened up and revealed. And that also reveals all the secrets of the Torah. And then finally, he describes the revival of the dead, where now a person has entered into the soul of the Messiah, and they have unlocked the Messiah within themselves. And many people do this, and it's also possible that it seems like people can do this when they're not ready. And so that's why you find a lot of people with the messianic complex. It doesn't mean they're doing anything wrong. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means that there's a part of their soul that got unlocked, and they aren't necessarily knowing how to deal with it yet. But it's a part of the human experience. It's part of this journey that we have within our own capacity to go through. And then he describes this revival of the dead, which is this experience that happens even after that, where before they were just escaping the physical world. You're just going higher and higher into the spiritual realms. But then once you reach the revival of the dead, you actually are able to come back into your body, because the entirety of reality becomes one with God. And so there's nothing impure anymore. Even the physical world is pure if you know how to deal with it right. And so then you become reawakened. And at that point, the sensations of the body and the physicality of the body all becomes much more alive than it ever was. And then it's like you're walking, fully realized as a human. And that's what he describes as the journey that humanity is on and that we're trying to get to.
Wow. So this is all in Ishaq Kedusha. I remember we talking about this in an earlier podcast. I'm not sure if it all made it in though, but yeah, interesting. It's good. It's good. So is it part about the spark of Mashiach that's also in there, or that was added?
It's one of the gates. I don't know how deep he goes into it, because what I'm saying is like a concoction of many different sources. and understandings. But yeah.
Interesting. What did you learn
No,
this
this was a few years
recently?
ago. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So to summarize, there's basically he basically goes through all the different levels of the soul, essentially,
Yeah,
and
he's not
explaining
the
each
only
one.
one. Many basically throughout history, you can see that in every generation, there's a few people that are sort of going through this experience, or at least a few that wrote it down. And so you basically find these books about ethics, or about attaining prophecy, or about becoming the Messiah, or whoever it is, in many generations. And when you read their books, they all have very similar themes because clearly they all sort of went through this process, and now they're writing about it. So if you read Orchos HaTzadikim, which is this phenomenal anonymous, we don't know who the author is, which I think just gives it so much more charm, book about the paths of the righteous, or the ways of the righteous. And he just describes all the aspects of how to clean up the soul and how to overcome all the negative traits, and also isolation and the different things that he describes in that book. And that's very similar to Mesilas Yesharim, which is by the Ramchal, which Chabad doesn't necessarily talk about so much for other reasons, but he also describes a similar process. So it's written, and then what's interesting is that all of them show through their writing that this is alluded to way back in the Talmud and the Mishnah, and clearly from the Tanakh itself. This is really what it's always been about. That's sort of what their whole argument is.
Um,
Interesting. Yeah, it does go back to the different ways of going through the soul, etc. Yeah, welcome, Alif. Did you have any
yes, I
questions
do actually. I've been
specifically,
listening
Alif?
for quite a while, gentlemen, and I'm just wondering, you guys. I hear a lot of this talk, Atmos, five dimensions, five names, but have you guys ever like seen it, or you guys just like talking like it was LARP or comic book? You guys
Yeah,
have
we've seen
seen the
it.
fifth dimension from where your soul came from?
Yeah, we've seen it with our
That's a
soul's eye.
lie.
Yeah.
Okay,
For
well,
real,
let me
for
ask
real,
let me ask you
for
something.
real.
Fast.
Is it okay? So why are you guys keeping this?
I
No,
knew it
it's
would be
okay. It's not an
an
issue.
issue,
I'm just
but
curious.
if one,
What? Sorry. First of all, what's the name again? Leaf, because it's a little cut off.
Actually, that's LLF.
LLF. Nice to meet you. How are you?
Yes, I'm intact.
You're intact. Okay. So I'm curious because I behind the words that you're saying, there's the words that you're saying, the question that you're asking, but then there's an energy that's coming behind that as well. And I'm
Okay.
curious what that is. What's going
Yeah,
on? What's been going on?
it's Inquisition.
Okay, just Inquisition, fine. You're
Okay,
just
so like
curious.
okay, no, my
Yeah,
my thing is this. Look, here you have. I'm assuming you're a Jewish man.
I am. Yeah.
Okay, here you have two Jewish men, right? Talking about the unseen like it's nothing. Like, oh yeah, hey, oh la 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 la. But meanwhile, you watch Christians and Muslims unalive each other because they don't know the truth.
It's very painful.
okay.
And then so you guys keep all the secrets and gatekeep to humanity.
Well,
Well,
I'm
I
trying
mean,
to
I
share it
applaud
now.
you, host, because
That's
I've
when they
never
have
seen
get.
any Jewish man talk the stuff you talk. So
But
you're
most,
probably gonna get unalive like Jesus.
can I share something?
How so?
It's Awtsmoos is very humble, but there aren't many Jews that know this stuff at this level, or that have experienced it at this level. It takes a certain type of soul who has gone through specific things to go through that, to even one relate to these teachings. There's a lot of people that study these teachings because there have been movements that have been created through tremendous amount of self-sacrifice. Like the Chabad movement was born in blood. It was persecuted heavily by other Jews. It was persecuted by the Russian government. All of its leaders were arrested, threatened with death. Many of its leaders were exiled and sentenced to death. So it's not this project of getting this out there has been born in blood, literally, not to
Yeah.
use Christian terminology. And so because of that, they've started schools. And if you study the Chabad movement, only recently with the Lubavitcher Rebbe did it become massive. But until then, it was a moderately large, moderate sect of Judaism, very rejected by other parts because of complex reasons. And so they've had many students.
Hold on.
I'll
So hold
I'll,
on.
I'll wrap
Is
this
it,
up.
okay?
Yeah.
Hold on. Hold on. Are you telling?
your audio is a little too loud because we have like some mix. If you could maybe speak like further from the mic, so we could like even out the audio would be better. Yeah, at least. Anyway, go
Yeah, I
ahead.
took my headphones off.
All right, cool. Yeah, just because we have like different audio levels, just so we keep it like, relatively similar.
So-
Yeah, anyway, go ahead.
So are you telling me Shabbat would be your antichrist for the Jewish reality or the Jewish truth?
We don't really have these terms of antichrist, or we don't
The
necessarily follow that.
Anti-truth.
No, it's not anti-truth. It's a
It is the
movement.
truth.
You're basically saying, hey guys, why don't you share this stuff more publicly? Why aren't there Jewish men out there talking about this? Only Awtsmoos is, and I'm trying to give you the history how Awtsmoos has come to be on this channel talking about this. This is a very rare phenomena. Usually, the rabbis that understand the things that he's talking about, first of all, are much older. They're married with children. They don't use the internet. They're like from another generation, and they have many followers that come and learn by them at their feet in Jerusalem or wherever, and praise them and donate money to them and all this stuff. And so that's typically how it's working. They're not in the business of going on TikTok, surrounded by chaos, people screaming free pally or whatever they have to deal with, and sharing the most basic knowledge of Judaism while containing the deepest secrets. That's not usually how this works. Okay, but because the Chabad movement exists, there has been democratized the deepest secrets of Kabbalah to the widest possible audience, so that a person like Awtsmoos can come to be, who is who has his story that's up to him to share, who somehow at a very young age knows all of these things, can talk about all of these things, and can decide to go on TikTok in middle of all the chaos and surrounded by the disgustingness that is TikTok, and to share this stuff. It takes a certain level of courage and bravery and discipline to be able to navigate the space. You have to be a person of certain spiritual character, because I'll speak for myself. I've been through a journey, but if I go on TikTok and I start getting lost in the feed, there goes all my spiritual work. So for most people that are trying to grow connected to God, they're not on social media. They're avoiding all this stuff. And the ones that are on social media didn't have the chance to study the secrets because, quite frankly, their ancestors were persecuted, killed, massacred, kicked out from every country, because every time the Jews got together and start to share their secrets first amongst themselves just to build themselves back up, everybody else freaks out and starts persecuting them. So it's a very complex history. And thankfully, the positive side of this is that there have been many generations, 7 in particular, or 10 or whatever, of people that have preserved this knowledge, that have passed it down, and who have started to spread it more and more, and who have now, Chabad has centers all over the world where they freely go out and volunteer and help communities and try to teach these things. And a lot of times they have to teach the most basic ideas, like what is a parsha, what is the Torah, what is a mitzvah. But at the core of what Chabad is trying to do is teach the deepest secrets. It's just, it's a process.
Okay, that explains it. So should I join Chabad?
I'll let Awtsmoos tackle that one.
Well, what does it mean to join Chabad? I mean, Chabad is an organization. It's also a philosophy. It's also like a way of life. I mean, what does it even mean to be part of Chabad? That's like a real question. I mean, one should learn about the Lubavitcher Rebbe and maybe learn about his teachings and his instructions. Usually, people associate like the things that the Lubavitcher Rebbe said to do as Chabad, but really it's just like universal truths. Like even the United States government in 1991 accepted the 7 Noahide laws in American law because of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and there's actually I believe it's a bill passed by the Congress. Is called Education Day, where it mentions the Lubavitcher Rebbe by name and says that we acknowledge the 7 Noahide laws are like the universal truths. I don't remember the exact language, but you can look it up. But the point is, whether or not someone is like part of Chabad, whatever that means, one should definitely learn about the Lubavitcher Rebbe and his teachings, and one should learn about the 7 Noahide laws and continue to explore the teachings. We had a guest
I would say
requesting up
a series that might find enjoyable, and I think there's someone who even made a few audiobooks of the first 2 of the series. The previous Chabad Rebbe, who was the one before the most recent one, and his father-in-law, he was a prolific author. And so aside from all the Torah and the secrets and the teachings that he wrote, he also wrote these stories about the development of the Lubavitch movement, of the Chabad movement. And he describes its early days and the founders and what motivated them to do what they did. And I think reading that is fantastic. A person, you know, I'll give a little bit of a personal tidbit. So my parents grew up secular Jews. Their parents emigrated from Europe to wherever, America and Brazil and wherever, escaping whatever was happening to them and trying to build a new life for themselves. So they grew up without any of the tradition. You know, they had some vague memories of their grandparents making kiddush on Shabbat, and that's about it. But for my mom, let's say, when she was in high school and seeking truth, and we all have hopefully have some sort of journey where we're trying to find the truth. So all of her friends went to different spiritual callings, and at some point, somebody gave her that she was also looking into Egypt and into different teachings or whatever, and someone gave her this Lubavitch Rebbe memoirs, is what they're called, where it describes the old town, the old shtetl, and the old life that they had there. And when she read that, her heart was just so filled with joy and love for what he describes there that she joined Chabad back back in the day. But I say all this to say, I think that sometimes people have an inaccurate idea of what it's like to be a Jew. I mean, there's so few of us. People don't, you're not coming in contact with most. The ones that you do are, who knows who, or in the media, or already famous, or whatever it is. But the average regular Jew is kind of an unknown experience to most. And even the portrayals that you would see, let's say in some sort of play like, what's that one, Fiddler on the Roof, or let's say Hollywood makes one, those are written by people that grew up in the religious community, were hurt by it. There are many reasons why a person can be hurt by it. And then joined the secular world and kind of look back a little bit with disdain, a little bit with fondness, a little bit of mix of both. And so they write these caricatures of what it's like, and they'll always highlight the downsides or the drama because maybe it makes for a good story or because of what they've been through. So when you read the Lubavitch Rebbe's memoirs, I think it paints a different picture. It paints this idyllic town that he and his grandparents remember, and I think it's a much better.
Can I interject?
Portrayal. Go for it, yeah.
Okay, so this is my question to the Jewish community. By doing such activities with Shabbat, Kabbalah, etc., are you guys able to tap in to some kind of a system of faith where you have favor in the eyes of the universe? You're not.
I believe so, if it's done with a pure heart.
Okay, is that accessible for everyone or just the Jews?
I believe it's accessible for everyone.
Okay, but since you guys learned it first, you guys are the ones that are going to teach.
That's what they say. I'm very wary because there are people that feel, I don't know how to say it. There's some people that have taken Judaism, and again, I really don't want. There's so many people in the world, and it's anytime you're assuming anyone's intentions, you're already going down the wrong road. But sometimes people are afraid of other people making themselves greater than them. So as soon as Jews start talking about like, oh, we're going to teach, it's a slippery slope because then you have that one person who's not, their heart is not necessarily in the right place, or they haven't gotten to that right place yet. And now they're talking in that way, and it comes across as very arrogant and all of that. So the short answer of what you're saying is, yeah, I think whoever has knowledge has a responsibility to teach, and I hope more Jews step up and start teaching. But Jews are also not in the most spiritual, refined state right now because of everything that is going on in the world. So there's a combination of healing and spiritual growth that needs to happen for the Jewish people and also for the rest of humanity.
I'm going to be honest, I've met a lot of Jews on TikTok because I live really where there's no Jewish people. And the host has been the most enlightening so far. The rest of them are really arrogant for some reason.
They're hurt.
Is that because, okay, there's still, it seems like the ones that are really enlightened, because there's this other guy, what's his name? another rabbi, and he talks a lot about the Kabbalah, and he's good at it. And he's got real real pink cheeks. Have you met him? Anyway, so he's spilling out a lot of secrets, and to me, it's good, man, because I mean, it sets you apart from the arrogance. You know, you're being humble.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Jewish people need to be showing to us is their humility side, because we know, okay, you're the chosen, cool, but now be like, yo, like teach us some, dog, because it seems like that arrogance came from something you know.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm glad you're saying that too. I think positive reinforcement is always good, and I've said this for a while to some people that I know. I think the Jews could use more positive reinforcement from non-Jews because they have a little bit of a complex where they feel like they need to compete with non-Jews to be more non-Jewish than the non-Jews. They have to be more atheist, more secular, more materialistic to compete, more cool. And I think a lot of it stems from insecurity, like feeling like if they're Jewish or if they're Jewy, then that's lame. And one of the ways that that can be overcome is simply by non-Jews telling them, like, hey, go look into your tradition, embrace it. That's kind of what we want from you. Not to manipulate people, but if that's a feeling that someone has, I think it's a good thing to verbalize it as opposed to just, being negative about how a person is perceiving the Jewish person. I actually know a guy who became religious because he was dating a Muslim girl while eating bacon, and this girl told him, like, hey, why are you doing that? And then he started to look into his tradition, and he's a fantastic person. He had his whole journey. So I think that sort of thing could be helpful.
Okay, so so I'll say Gentile Christians. Okay, so it seems like they're tapping into this 5-dimensional energy, and then it overtakes their body because they don't really understand, and then they call demons and angels and all. It's a mess, dude. But it seems like they get the road, but they don't understand the function of it. And I think that if you guys were able to teach them, hey, you're doing something with your body that's accessing these higher realms, you should probably know that your steps and stuff. Instead of just talking in tongues and feeling that energy and thinking it's that's the way it is, but it's not.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's a very good point.
There's a guest who's requesting. I want to bring up a new guest. If you guys are okay with that, and even if you're not, hopefully it's cool. Hi, welcome.
Hi, nice to meet you guys. How y'all
nice to meet you. Excellent.
So, what topic are we discussing?
That is a very interesting question. Elise, do you want to tell him?
I think we're just having a conversation.
Anyone?
Elise, I don't know if we're gonna dip out, if we're gonna hang around, but you're doing good. All right.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. We were talking about originally a long time ago. We were talking about something. I don't actually remember something. For whatever reason, we went into
man. I didn't even know what that meant till today. I was like,
yeah, we were talking Awtsmoos, which is my profile name, not my real name, by the way. It's but it's a Kabbalistic term that refers to the essence of the Creator, which is found in everything. The foundation of all reality and everything that exists only exists from the Awtsmoos, which the Maimonides says is the truth of His being, the core of the Creator. It says not only is everything from the Creator, but everything is constantly being recreated from the truth of His being every second. And it says the actual true existence of everything that exists is the Awtsmoos. So nothing can exist without the Awtsmoos, etc. And then we veered into other discussions about different levels of the soul and how you can go through those different levels through different gates of divine service. And then we talked about why are we even sharing these teachings at all? Well, other people aren't really teaching them so much. And now here we are.
Isn't Kabbalah a rabbinical text?
Yes, the Torah is also a rabbinical text because the Creator gave us the Torah, and the Creator is a rabbi.
Traditionally, rabbinical means is kind of like a Reddit thread on the traditional books.
The Kabbalah is definitely accepted as legitimate Judaism according to all authentic Torah sources. The Vilna Gaon, who was accepted by all Ashkenazi Jews, accepted the Kabbalah as legitimate. He also wrote commentaries on the Kabbalah. Other Jewish communities, such as the Sephardim, also accept the Kabbalah, and the Hasidim especially accept the Kabbalah as legitimate. All the authentic Jewish sources accept the Kabbalah as legitimate, the same way they accept the Talmud and other
So
writings.
it isn't really rabbinical. It isn't really an explanation or anything, right? It is more of its own source of material.
It's both. Rabbinical, the rabbis are part of the source, and the ideas were passed down to Moses at Mount Sinai, but they're elaborated in every generation by the rabbis. The rabbis are part of the source as well. Everything comes from the Creator telling Moshe, but certain ways how those things are revealed are through the rabbis of the generation. It depends on the system. Essentially, it's from the Creator at Mount Sinai to Moses, but the elaboration of it is by the rabbis.
Do me
which
a
are
favor,
also
can you
sources.
explain how a message or the creation gets from the Atmos to the man? I don't know
Prophecy,
the
you
words,
mean?
but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the Awtsmoos is the essence of creation, which is constantly creating everything in the universe. Everything that happens only happens because the Awtsmoos makes it happen. Even the Baal Shem Tov says, even a leaf blowing in the wind is not blowing because of the wind, but it's blowing because the Awtsmoos is making it blow. So usually people think that Hashem the Creator would make the wind blow, and then automatically the winds would blow because the leaves would blow because of the wind. But no. The Baal Shem Tov comes along and says, even after the Creator makes the wind does not actually do anything at all. The wind is just there for special effects, and the leaves blow individually because the Creator is causing each of them to happen. So based on that, the Baal Shem Tov also says that everything that someone sees or hears is a direct message from the Awtsmoos in their divine service, even if it just
Isn't
happens
that kind of taking the agency away from mankind?
Wait, hold on, let me ask him a question. Okay, so you're telling me that the wind has free will, but the leaf doesn't?
No, there's no free. I was in the middle of answering, but let me explain real quick just to answer that, and I'll get back to the explanation. So, usually people think that the Creator would send the wind, that the Creator would make the wind blow for whatever reason, and then after the Creator make the wind blow, then other people usually would think that the wind causes the leaves to blow naturally through natural processes. If you have wind, then leaves blow. Makes sense. But no, it says even after the wind is blowing, even after the Creator causes the wind to blow, the wind is not naturally causing the leaves to blow. The leaves only move not because of the natural reaction of the wind, but even after you have the wind, the leaves individually move only because the Creator causes them to move in the exact form that they're moving in order to correspond to how the wind is going. So it's like special effects, but the point is nothing happens on its own. But so on the one hand, everything that someone sees or hears is a direct message from the Awtsmoos in how they consider the Creator, even if it's just an accident or coincidental, because it's all being created from the Awtsmoos every second and being directed. That's one thing. But then there's another concept of prophecy, which is a very specific type of divine revelation that's talked about in the Maimonides, a medieval century rabbi, in a part of his book called "The Laws of the Foundations of the Torah," chapter 7, where he talks about what prophecy is specifically. Prophecy is a specific method through which the Awtsmoos communicates to prophets through certain visions, and he tells them, or he makes them understand what the visions mean in order usually to tell them to do something, either for themselves or to tell other people to do something, not against the Torah, but to do something within the optional matters, within the realm of things that people are allowed to do. Usually prophecy is sent to give instructions to people to do something, or sometimes to teach something to someone, but it's a very specific type of divine communication. As opposed to everything that someone sees is also divine communication in a way, but prophecy is like a deeper, more authentic way.
But isn't that
makes
taking
sense.
away any cause and effect relationship?
Ultimately, yes, that's the point. Ultimately, there's no real cause and effect. It's all just the Awtsmoos. But the Awtsmoos makes things look like it's cause and effect, so that we can also we understand things a bit. But ultimately, there's no real cause and effect. Ultimately, it's just the Awtsmoos. But he makes cause and effect so that we can like live in a world and like
Like
think that we understand
objective,
it.
like
kind of thing.
hypothetically, like I hear a joke and I smile not because I think it's funny, but because the Awtsmoos wants me to think it's funny.
I,
I guess
yeah,
that's
one of the
funny.
things that is discussed. This one actually, Osmus, I think you taught me this one of the Bob Rebbe. So he has this collection of teachings, which are like some of his most esoteric ideas that were republished right before uh, controversial to say, but before he passed. So um, one of those talks about the nature of nature and how that relates to the Osmos. And so what he describes, this whole thing that Awtsmoos here in the video chat is describing is something that is more specifically, it's I think it's more widely accepted in mainstream Judaism, but it's really broken down and elaborated and explored within the Chabad sect. And so the Lubavitch Rebbe, who's the most recent Chabad teacher, um, explains the nature of nature and why God would want to have it. And so it's a whole discourse, and he explains, different reasons and different lenses. But one thing that really stood out to me in what he says there is that God is infinite and can do everything, right? So, but for us to experience the essence of God, the Awtsmoos, can really only happen post limitation. Like there has to be a confinement, and then we have to see past the confinement. Otherwise, we're just getting pure light, and then we're just one with that light. In order to have this experience where we're separate and then we're still experience the constant creation, there has to be this limitation. And so that's how he describes nature as God basically does this very, very, very elaborate system that if you're within it, before you wake up, so to speak, or before you go through this journey, you could be led to believe that this whole thing is just running itself. In fact, Maimonides explains that for some people, people that are unrighteous or whatever, they actually they experience reality as if it's just running itself. They have bad luck. God doesn't intervene for them. Nothing good happens. But then once a person kind of breaks out of the system and becomes holy, then the divine intervention starts to happen. They start to see God in everything. Miracles start to happen. Nature God sort of winks, from behind the curtain, going like, "I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still here." And so what he describes in this talk about the nature of nature is that God creates this really elaborate system of cause and effect, so that once we're able to see past it, we can kind of get in on the joke and see that, yes, he's constantly creating everything from scratch, but he's doing it in such a perfect way that it's as if he's not infinite. And that's sort of the biggest flex, so to speak, of an infinite creator is to make something that's not infinite within the infinite.
Well, so where does Judaism stand on the issue of free will?
That's the deepest question. It's very complex. It seems first of all, it's just it's a hard question to answer on one foot because it's like one of the deepest questions. There is a talk in Parsha Nitzavim. Maybe obviously, I don't know if you're familiar with this. I'm sure you're familiar with it. I don't know if you remember it offhand. The Nitzavim Parsha and Dvar Malchus rather talks about free will, but if I remember correctly, what he essentially says is that at the lower levels, you're not actually having free will because you're just responding to stimuli, cause and effect. If you're basically tapping into the animal soul, the animal within you, or sometimes even less than that. Like a person through their sin and through failing can go even below being an animal. They can become just like a living organism, like a plant, or even like a rock. They just become dormant. So if you're kind of in one of those early three stages, then you don't have free will, even though part of the experience is that you think you have free will, but you're really just responding to stimuli, cause and effect, all that stuff. But where free will comes in is you are always given the opportunity to return to God. And so as you get closer and closer to the divine, on the one hand, you might think that you're losing free will because now you need to become.
So it feels like you're losing your free will, but that's sort of a trick because what you're gaining is this kind of widened perspective. And sometimes that could be corrupted, and I think this is why there was always a sensitivity about sharing. I don't know if you can still hear me, my headphones died.
Yeah, it's better. Whatever you just did was better.
What?
What do you do? What do you do?
Oh, yeah? Oh, no, my headphones are off. So They died. Well,
Yeah,
perfect.
this is better.
So basically,
Yeah.
as you become more and more attached to the divine, even though like throughout that process you feel like you're losing your free will because earlier you had all these material instincts that you felt like you wanted, and now you sort of have to shed them. So there is this phase where you feel like you're losing it, but then you attain real freedom. But I want to say this one thing that seems to happen is that there's this whole trend on the internet of people that like quote unquote leave the matrix. And I'm alluding to very specific figures, but it's kind of a trend overall where people like hack the social system and they think they're free now. And they just become horrible people and they go around and then they feel guilty. And so they need to cover it up by kind of hating Jews or whatever they, whatever they do. But that's sort of like, as a person grows spiritually, there's always these pitfalls that can happen. So that's sort of like an early stage of exiting the lower realms. You're entering into the higher realms, but you're not following the righteous path. And this is one of the reasons earlier, ELF, I'm forgetting how to pronounce it, was asking like, why don't Jews share these secrets, all this stuff? Because there are forces that kind of tap into these ideas, but then channel it for their own selfish gain. But it is the Chabad's opinion that at the stage that we're in now, everyone should kind of be awakened and reach the highest level of possible humanity.
Okay, I have a question. What is your Jewishness tell you about being possessed by fire spirits?
It's a good question. So the only thing it reminds me of is that in the Vilna Gaon, who Awtsmoos mentioned earlier, who was like one of the most prolific sages, I think from 300 years ago, maybe a little earlier. So he has this writing, and it's written about in other places. He's just the most recent person I remember wrote about it. He describes the stages of hell. And he basically says that the soul needs to be purified. And so in order for the soul to be purified, and this is also alluded to in Jewish law, like Jewish law, the Mishnah, which is what the Talmud is based on, is really very ancient secrets that are buried in material law, which is sort of how Judaism has preserved secrets since Moses. Moses went up the mountain, which is a physical mountain, but it also is a representation of climbing up his own inner mountain, of reaching, the pinnacle of Awtsmoos within his own experience. And then he comes down with physical laws, and that's both him taking these most advanced ideas and bringing them down to the people, but it's also a physical act. So within Judaism in general, there's this whole concept of you take spiritual things and you physicalize them, because that's what God does too. Everything starts off as like a concept, and then it becomes material. So to answer your question about the fire, in Jewish law, there's this like, what happens to a broken vessel? Like, what do you have to do with a broken vessel? So sometimes you have to bury it, sometimes you have to burn it, depending on what it is. And what's explained is that, within ourselves, we have a part of ourselves that's that vessel, and if it breaks or if we do things that are wrong, it has to go through this process. I don't know that we call it being, possessed by fire. I don't think we really believe in that sort of stuff or focus on that stuff. In general, we try not to focus on anything that is like going to lead you down a dark path. You just stay positive and it'll be positive. But the concept of fire has to relate to that cleansing process.
The reason I ask is because I think I broke myself. I think I just did a bunch of like weird shit with my psyche. And then I met some dude that like looked through my eyeballs and made me do a bunch of stuff in my closet. And then I got like possessed by a fire spirit. And I took that thing to heaven to get pardoned.
Mm-hmm.
And then its debts were forgiven. And then it kind of like just went away. But I was just curious about those fire spirits, because the Bible talks about ministering fire spirits. And I think that's what you're talking about. Can you experience hell on earth, like in a body?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the explanations of hell is that it's something that a person goes through in their own lifetime. So that can definitely be the case. In fact, I think a lot of people don't even merit to go to hell until they wake up. And it's another reason why I've heard people say like, oh, you shouldn't teach people the deeper secrets, because then they actually become liable for their actions. Like until then, you could say they didn't have free choice. They were just asleep. But once they kind of have been awakened, now their negative actions have consequences. But this thing about the fire spirit, it used to be very common in Jewish tradition that, it was called a dibuk. It's like an old Jewish lore.
Yeah.
So we say that in Judaism today, it's kind of known that those don't really, they either aren't around anymore, they don't bother Jewish people. I'm not exactly sure, but it seems to be from our tradition that it's, a part of reality. I don't know exactly how it works. We also say in the Talmud that God is perfectly just. So sometimes, like, God will ordain somebody should do a bad thing, right? Like the examples they give are like these evil empires that destroyed the Jews, and so God ordained that. So why, so they're not bad if God ordained that the Jews should be punished. But the answer that the prophet gives, and what it's trying to teach, is that God has everything planned out perfectly. So they were evil people. God, because he's just, makes them then do this horrible evil task, this evil thing that's even more evil, so that he could punish them even more. So it's this whole, we can never fathom all the intricacies of God's creation, and that's why, to your point about the fire spirits, it could be true. I don't know about it.
It's interesting about the free choice you mentioned. It's interesting that this week's parsha actually, in this week's part of the Torah, the Dr. has an interesting explanation about that, because in the beginning of the parsha it talks about, it says what the Jewish people going out to war. It says when you go out to war over your enemies, then certain laws apply. But the idea of going out to war spiritually, it explains in the deeper meanings, is when the soul is in the spiritual universes, it's at peace. Before the person is born, they're in the spiritual world, and the only place where there's war is the earth. But in the spiritual realm, there's no war. Everything is good, no problems at all. But then it says the purpose of a war is like to conquer, to gain more territory, to make it part of something. So the idea of the soul, when the soul is being sent into the body to be born, that's like a person going out to war. And it's essentially the war of the world, to like conquer the darkness of the world and to transform the darkness into light through the commandments of the Torah and the deeper meanings of the Torah being spread to the world. So this is like a war. We're at a spiritual war when a soul comes into the world. So it says, when you go out to war, then certain laws apply. And the commentator Rashi says, what kind of war does this verse talk about? This is talking about, I believe he says, in optional war. There's different kinds of wars
choice
in Judaism, but basically like mandatory wars for self-defense, and there's certain optional wars to gain more territory. But the point is, in a spiritual sense, it says that this war, since the war in the verse, in a spiritual sense, is talking about the spiritual war where a soul is sent from the realm of peace in the spiritual world to the world of evil in this world, to the war to conquer the darkness into light. So this whole war is an optional war, meaning it's like the soul itself. It's as if the soul chooses on its own to be alive, even though it says in the Talmud that a person is born by force. One place it says a person does not choose to live; they're forced to live. But it says that really, it's an optional war. That really, we're talking about earlier we talked about the different levels of the soul. In the core of the soul, in the yechida, in the essence of the singularity of the soul that's united with the essence of the Creator, since the Creator Himself causes everything to happen, so the essence of the soul, the singularity of the soul that's united with the Creator, is also can do anything that it wants. It's not forced to do anything. It's like it only wants what the Creator wants. So regarding the essence of the soul, the entire war of someone's life in the world is optional. It wants to go out to the war to conquer the darkness, etc. But then regarding the other parts of the soul, which is like someone's actual consciousness, how they're alive, regarding those parts of the soul, it seems to be forced. So similarly with like free will, everything is directed from the Awtsmoos, which is really from the essence of a person's soul, but sometimes consciously people don't always realize, so sometimes people can do things that's not always from free choice. But the point is that free choice comes from the essence of the person's soul.
What is the thing inside the person that would make them make the choice to go through the battle of evil in this world? Like when they say you don't have to, it's a choice. So
well, that's because it wants what the Creator wants, and the Creator, I mean, according to the deeper teachings, created the world in order to have a dwelling place in the lowest possible level. Meaning, he wanted to make a world where there is evil initially, and there's initially darkness, in order that it should be transformed to goodness from within the world itself. The Creator originally made a perfect world in the Garden of Eden, but it didn't have any meaning really because he just made it perfectly. But he wanted to. The main reason why he made the world is that there should be a perfect world, but that's transformed to be perfect from within, and that's the reason of creation. That's what the Creator wants. So the essence of the soul is united with the Creator, and it wants what the Creator wants to transform even the lowest level to godliness.
Yeah, one of the ways it's explained one of the ways it's explained is that a person would rather have bread that they work for than bread they're given for free. So even though originally, yeah, it's nice to have unlimited everything, but then at some point a person gets bored of that, and so then they'd much rather be a self-made man, because then you have, it's not bread of shame. You don't feel like it was given to you. So even though
there's no real sense of purpose in having everything without working for anything.
Exactly. So he gifted us. First, he gifted his creation, and it was everything that they could ever want. And then on top of that, he gifted them the ability to actually work for it, which was an additional gift. But while they're working for it, it doesn't necessarily feel like a gift.
I understand that. Now, how do you feel about I saw somebody in the comments about the afterlife, because I've always ascribed to the kind of reasoning that we're here to improve ourselves, and it'll kind of go along with what you were saying, like we choose to fight these evils in this world because our souls need to grow.
Okay, so in my experience, and from reading the scriptures, there's this part where Elisha, he's like, yeah, well, I want a double portion of the Spirit.
Yeah, Elisha.
Is it possible that when a hungry vessel is hungered, it's asking for its old soul, so it receives its soul from heaven, its prior soul, its remembrance, but it also has a thirst, and that's the spirit. So what's the difference between the soul and the spirit?
Well, we talked about that earlier a little bit. I can answer that in a second, but let me answer voodoo. We talked about it earlier with the different levels of the soul, but voodoo, just to answer your question, yes, Judaism does believe in different kinds of afterlives. The ultimate purpose, though, is this physical world, and I'll explain. After the Messiah comes, it says that there's going to be a resurrection of the dead, when people who have passed away already will come back to life miraculously and live forever in this physical world. So that's the ultimate stage of reality, because this physical world is the main thing, greater than all of the heavens combined. This is where the Creator himself wants to be manifested. But in the meantime, before the Messiah comes, there's a temporary waiting room known as the heavens, or heaven, or the Garden of Eden, which is a spiritual world where the soul goes. Either it's where the soul existed before it was born, or it's the place that the soul goes after it completed its service in the world for that lifetime, after it did the Torah and learned after the Torah. And in the spiritual world, essentially, based on the Torah that they've learned, or the commandments or the good deeds they've done, they receive a certain level of delight from the Creator. Like if they learn certain Torah ideas, they realize the deeper secrets of those ideas, and they have delight from that. And based on the good deeds they did in this world, they realize, wow, that was such a good thing that I did. And then they have all this kind of divine delight. But ultimately, the revelation that will happen after Messiah comes, and the resurrection of the dead, all of those souls in the heavens will all come back down to the physical world, because the physical world will be a lot greater.
Okay. Scriptures saying the spirit goes to God, and you're saying the soul goes to a holding area?
Well, I wanted to let video respond.
I just said it's going to be crowded.
Maybe not that crowded. Yeah,
I don't think we know what it's going to be like.
What you're saying?
But there are different types of holding areas. There's like positive holding areas and not as positive holding areas. Like what he described as heaven, this divine blissful state of cleaving to God, and the strength of your cleaving depends on your acts and deeds in this world and what you've studied in this world. That's what gives you that's what defines how strong that bond is going to be, how much you could suck from the light, so to speak, of God's pleasure. But so that's like heaven. But then there's other holding areas, which hell in theory is a holding area too. It's not permanent. Although Maimonides does describe that if a person spends their whole lifetime stuck in materialism, or bad mouthing others, or not righting their wrongs, he has like a few different categories, then they basically cut themselves off from recognizing God. So even though they think they're seeking all the infinite pleasures, what they're actually doing is they're escaping the essence of reality. They're going further and further away from the Awtsmoos. They're more and more in imagination, because physical pleasure is essentially imagination, right? It's an illusion, and that's why it doesn't last. Holiness, you could have as much of it as you want, and it'll always be pleasurable, and you'll want more. Physical pleasure, after a while, it kind of loses its flavor, and you need more extreme versions, or you need to try something new. So the people, anytime a person is seeking heaven as a material thing or imagining the afterlife as some sort of material pleasure, what they're actually imagining is being cut off from the Creator. And after a while, then the soul just gets destroyed, and that's sort of a mercy from God, because to be cut off from the Creator, it might be fun for a little while you're seeking temptations, but after a while, those temptations lose their thrill, and then you're just lost. You're just lost in the infinite chaos, and you're not close to the source. So, as a kind gesture, after a while, God just gets rid of the soul if it was very, very evil. But usually, it's there's many stages before that.
There's a lot of my questions.
So there's no making of demons in Judaism. There's no making a evil person into a demon in Judaism.
I wouldn't say that doesn't exist. Again, you have to know so much to say anything with 100% certainty when it comes to spiritual matters. But I think one of the concepts, there's different, in general, everything's multi-layered. So like a lot of times when we talk about heaven and hell, we're talking about, literally after life, but then it's also part of an individual soul journey here in this world. And so the same would be true for demons. Again, I don't know if this is a Jewish concept. I haven't read into it too much. But, it could be argued and it could be said that if a person falls from heaven, if a person becomes a demon, they become a demon. It just means that they've embraced evil and they've embraced selfishness and hedonism to a point where their soul is further and further away from the source, and they're now kind of a walking demon. But I don't know the rules around that, and I don't want to say that with certainty.
Okay. Any of you guys watch Esoterica?
No, I can't say I do.
It's a scholar, Justin Sledge, on YouTube. Very good videos about the Kabbalah and all kind of mysticism, actually.
Interesting. I try to avoid. I used to be into some of that stuff, but I try to avoid it because once you connect to the Torah's mysticism and you start cleaving to the light, first of all, it starts to teach you directly. Like God starts kind of implanting this as you deserve to know it. And then some of this other esoteric wisdom starts to feel like kind of unclean and, like, why would I want something that's half good, half bad, half mixed? Like in the Garden of Eden, the tree of good and evil, of knowledge of good and evil.
Is there a difference between knowing it and embracing it?
I guess it depends. In Hasidic language, knowing, the Hebrew word for knowing, das, is intimacy. So it's really the same thing. It's actually a stage after embracing. Like first is the spark of the idea. It's just on your awareness that that thing exists or that idea is true or you know about it. Not know, but you're aware of it. And then you process it, you grasp it, or that word you just said, embrace it. And that's kind of the processing stage. And then after all of that comes to be, then you know it. Like a person says about Adam knew his wife. So it's referring to intimacy.
Okay. So with all this information, why do you guys need a Messiah?
This is messianic information. The Messiah's job is to teach this to the world.
The tip of the Goldberg. If you think this isn't good deep, the Messiah is going to teach infinitely deeper levels than this. This is like nothing, by the way. When the Messiah comes, yes, it says in one of the prophecies, it says, a new Torah will emanate from me. There's never going to be a replacement for the Torah. But Rashi says a new Torah means the new deeper meanings and the deeper reasoning of the Torah that is going to be revealed to the Messiah. So there's like infinitely deeper. The Kabbalah is only like a prelude to the Torah secrets that the Messiah is going to teach.
The Messiah also has a job to fix the physical world around us. Like this whole, let's say, fight over the Temple Mount and the temple, it's this obviously pinnacle of religious, things. But the reason why it's such a focus within Jewish, learned Jewish culture, secular Jews don't want to talk about it. They're not interested in it. They don't want. They're tired of fighting. They just want to live their life and be left alone, which is understandable. But practicing Jews that study, that are spiritual, that are cleaving to God, that want more and more of it, want the temple because that's a representation of all of earth being fixed. That there's this central point, just like basically it all comes. One way to think of it, again, it's hard to speak about these things with certainty, but one way to think of it is like this: Moses is the ultimate prophet. We say there is no prophet like Moses, and Moses clearly reached the essence of the Creator and goes all the way to the pinnacle. And now his job is to bring it into the world and to teach it and to spread it and to do this whole mission. And the way he does that is unique from the other prophets. The other prophets want to teach about God. They write some books. They write a scroll or multiple scrolls, and they preach to the community. And they're recognized as great people. All of them have relationships with the king. For someone to have a relationship with the president, clearly they're a notable character, and they're very spiritual and very accomplished. Okay, fantastic. But Moses is this whole other type of prophet where he's not just saying these esoteric deep truths, but he's leading an entire people on a journey that will then become a symbol of what prophecy is for all of humanity. Like in those earlier books where they all discuss how a person goes up these higher gates of understanding and of holiness and cleaving to the essence of the Creator, they describe this journey where at first a person's in the dark, and then they leave, and then they isolate themselves, and then they go on this journey, and then they have these battles, and then finally at the end they reach the promised land. Or even before the promised land, first they reach a space of like pinnacle understanding, and then they descend back into the world, and then they're resurrected, so the physical world is rectified. So that individual journey is the journey that Moses takes the entire Jewish people on, which then becomes part of history, right? God instructs him to take the Jewish people on this journey, which then becomes part of history, and then all of humanity gets to study from his book, which is history. So, when somebody reads these books about these people that have these spiritual experiences, you're reading, words on a page about concepts. When you read the Torah, when you see a Jew, when you see history unfolding, it's like God writing through Moses and through the Jewish people's story and through all of history, this lesson on how to get close to him. That first you have to separate yourself, like the Jews are separate from the rest of humanity, and they're not encouraging other people to join them. It's just simply that part of what they're molded to become is an example of what it means to be awesome. So you want to jump on before you leave, or if you're gonna? Sorry.
I'm still here. I need to leave for
so
like
I'll
2
wrap
minutes.
it up. But anyhow, my point is that I forget.
We'll talk. We're still going to keep going.
Okay. So
like 2 minutes.
The way that story ends is with the same way the Jews went on this whole journey and entered the promised land, which is similar to Moses' personal journey of becoming a prophet, or anyone's journey of, in their own small way or however way they're capable of connecting to the essence of God. The same is true for all of humanity and all of the world. The whole world is to be, God wants he made this whole planet and all of us so that it could all be rectified and he could live here with us and we could all experience God as oneness and the presence and all of that. So that is all pinnacleized, symbolized by the temple, which is King David, who's also a prophet, who's also, he's the one that architect that. So the Messiah's job is really to fix the world, is to teach these teachings, is to get the Jews to follow the commandments, to understand the commandments, to want to do the commandments, to bring peace on earth. And he has a lot of challengers, and rightfully so, just like the prophet has in his spiritual journey lots of challengers. A physical Messiah would have lots of challengers. If you just read the other religious books, they're kind of set up to be challengers, unless his truth is able to surpass that. And, I'll give one more point. In the Jewish tradition, we have this idea that the temple is going to fall from heaven, made of fire, and then it's going to land in Jerusalem. So, like, anytime someone says, oh, you're trying to build the temple, anybody who knows anything about Jewish law and Jewish tradition knows that that's not true. Nobody's trying to build it. They're preparing for it to be built for the Messiah to come. But King David wasn't able to build the temple because he was a warrior. He had to be a warrior. He was a holy warrior. But because he had blood on his hands, God didn't want a temple from him. He wanted it from Solomon, who the whole, was very peaceful. And even he was imperfect. And so the Messiah needs to be more perfect than all of that. And so the temple is definitely not going to happen through a massive world war. And none of that's, and that's why in the tradition, it's always falling from heaven. And in Chabad, we have a similar tradition that it falls from heaven in Brooklyn. So the esoteric interpretation, besides the literal interpretation, and this is where me and Awtsmoos always go back to back, but the esoteric concept is that there is a temple in heaven right now. And to be in the temple means to be one with God, to be in God's private house, which you have to be worthy of. And that is kind of in heaven. It's right outside of our consciousness. But as the Messiah comes and as we get closer to redemption, that is going to fall from heaven onto the land, which is something that we individually experience in our own life. It'll fall into us. And so for Jews, that means falling in Jerusalem because that's the center of our spirituality. For Chabad movement, that means falling in Brooklyn because the Chabad Rebbe was in Brooklyn, and so that's the center of our spirituality. But another way to interpret it is that we all have that within ourselves. There is the temple waiting for us in heaven, and if we become righteous and we become holy and we keep the commandments that we're responsible of, not everyone has to keep all the commandments, and that's a longer discussion. Awtsmoos can get into it, but when we follow in God's way, we access heaven, and then we enter into the temple, and then we're in the temple. And then eventually the whole world will become a temple with when the Messiah comes.
So you just said a bunch of Christian stuff. Are you Christian?
Nope, that's mainstream Chabad teaching.
Wow. Okay, so your temple's gonna. Okay, so are you expecting an outer space Messiah?
Not me. I personally see it as a metaphor. And I think that the metaphor, once it becomes real, you don't care about whether or not it's a metaphor. So while it's not real, you say it's literal. Once it's real, everything is spiritual. So you don't even care that it was. It's like the example I give is, you have a child and you want the child to brush their teeth, and they don't want to brush their teeth. The only thing they want is candy. So you say to the child, if you brush your teeth every day, when you get older, you'll be able to have as much candy as you want. And then they get older and they have good teeth and they're happy about it, and now they're healthy. And then they say to you, hey, where's all that candy I wanted? So technically they're an adult. If they want all the candy, yes, they can go and they can buy all the candy they want. But the real gift was that they have healthy teeth and healthy habits. So it's the same with us. We are told things at our earlier stage. When we're like children, we're told things on a very literal level. And then as we get older and we get holier and closer to God, which is what it means to get older and more mature if we're doing it right, then the deeper aspect starts to show up, and we don't care so much about the literal interpretation. The literal is still important because they're still children. So we still always have to, it's very equitable, to use modern language. We need to keep everyone included. And until you have the wisdom to understand that it needs to be both literal and spiritual, you haven't really reached the real spiritual, because real spiritual is understanding that we share this experience with everyone, and that we have to talk in a language that everyone can appreciate. And when a person graduates, they'll understand it. But in the metaphor of the child, when he gets older, now he's an adult and he could actually buy the candy. So as we see in the world around us with technology and all these things that are happening, the literal metaphors, can actually be true as well. Like a actual space fiery temple can fall out of heaven if we don't know where physics is going. We don't know how everything is happening.
Personally, as a Jewish man, would you rather trust an alien Messiah or a human Messiah?
It's gotta be a human Messiah. I don't believe in aliens, really.
So when we say the temple will fall out of the heavens, but the Messiah is still a human in the earth, and he will somehow miraculously cause it to fall from the heavens.
And I'll just say that my opinion on the temple is it's not Christian. Yeah. It's my interpretation of the text that I read and my own experiences. So it's definitely not the mainstream, and I think Awtsmoos did like a little you're wrong, which is rightfully so. So I always, anytime he pushes back, I actually right away give him and I say, you're right, it's literal, it's going to fall from heaven. But then if somebody pushes me, then I say what I say.
Yeah. No, I mean, we'll find out exactly what happened, but generally, they say it could happen naturally, but when we talk about literal, we talk about miracles from the Creator. Like the ingathering and the exiles, it says it's going to be miraculous. The synagogues will be uprooted from their places in the ground. But one of the things in the Talmud is that all the synagogues in the universe, or in the earth, will be miraculously uprooted from the ground, fly into the air to travel to Jerusalem. So this is going to be a totally miraculous event. We won't need to have technology to do it, etc. We have another guest. Hopefully it'll be okay. We'll see. Never met him before. Hi, welcome, Angel.
Hello, bro. How are you?
Excellent.
Not too bad. It's a good morning. Seems interesting, so I'm wondering what's going on. You seem intelligent.
I concur. He is intelligent.
Okay, so one last question, guys. Okay. Now, who is going to decide if the Messiah is or not?
Well, when he comes, everyone's going to know, but he has to fulfill certain qualifications, which is mentioned in the Maimonides, the Rambam, medieval century rabbi, accepted by all Judaism, in this section of his law book called the Laws of Kings, chapter 11. he gives very specific qualifications for what the Messiah has to do. He has to, first of all, be someone who's like thinks about the Torah and is an expert in the Torah and does the commandments similar to King David, his father. And he has to influence all of the Jewish people to walk in his way, and then fight the wars of the Creator and succeed. And then build a temple in its place, which miraculously or naturally, whatever, once the temple is in its place in the Temple Mount, and miraculously gather the Jewish people back to Israel. Those are all the things that he will have to do. And when he does it, it's going to be miraculous. Like, there's going to be tons of miraculous events that happen. I mean, the synagogue is going to be flying in the air. People are going to be lifted up in the air. So everyone's going to know that it happened when it happened.
A king must be appointed by a court of 71 judges. A king must be a member of the tribe of Judah, a descendant of King David. Wow, I never knew these laws. Thank you so much.
Yes, chapter 11 in the Laws of Kings is what the Messiah.
I'll also say that Maimonides says that there doesn't need to be miracles. We have a tradition that there will be miracles, but he says that there doesn't need to be miracles, and we shouldn't necessarily expect miracles, and also that that the world itself won't be too much different in terms of our natural understanding of things. It's just that we'll reach a state of perfection and harmony, and we'll look back and everything will make sense. And the Lubavitch Rebbe has discourses where he explains, which Awtsmoos, has taught me. We've learned together, and we've discussed on some podcasts that there's these. One of the prophets says that there's going to be a splitting of the river, and there's also this idea that the sea is going to split again. And so, what? The second time, yeah.
Yeah.
No, so the way the Lubavitch Rebbe explains it is that when the sea split in Egypt, and Awtsmoos, I don't know if you want to jump in, but when the sea split in Egypt, what that was representative of, we say that all of the Jewish people that were leaving Egypt at that time,
not representative of what it
happened,
when it physically
and how
happened.
We think of it now, looking back. But when it happened, this is always weird. Yeah. When it happened, even like the lowest, spiritually, I mean, it says the handmaidens, not to say they are not spiritual, but basically everyone was at the level of prophecy that they were able to point and go like, oh, this is God. Like they were able to point with their finger and go, this is God, which means that they're having a direct experience of God. And what that means, how does that happen for someone? The material covers over its spiritual truth. Like we experience there as being a material world, and then we're trying to escape from the material world to enter heaven, or that it's in this battle between spiritual and physical, and we don't really know what to believe. But the physical world itself is spiritual. It's just part of its design is to hide that fact. So when the sea split, it was not only literally happening, but the sea represents this idea of the physicality splitting and the dry land underneath it being revealed, the dry land being this spiritual nature of reality. So the physical reality that you're in front of, the phone that you're holding in your hand, this world that you're experiencing is spiritual. It's godliness. And when the sea split, everyone experienced that. Now the prophet says in the future, even the river is going to split. So what's the river? So the Lubavitch Rebbe explains that a river, and this one Awtsmoos had to teach me a few times until, but basically the river is this constant stream. So what's a constant stream? Your thoughts. Basically, all spirituality is like this stream, right? You only engage with spirituality or your thoughts, if you want to take it down a notch, as this flow. Like you don't choose your thoughts; they're just kind of showing up for you. And thoughts are kind of the most spiritual thing that we have access to, unless we're accessing the spiritual realms. It's this very abstract reality. It's conceptual. Okay, so that is like this stream of river that's kind of passing. But when that splits, that means that you recognize everything as God, which means that at first, the physical split and you're able to recognize that physicality is really spiritual. But when the Messiah comes, when we have the redemption, you're going to realize that even spirituality is hiding the essence of the Creator. Everything is constantly being created brand new. Everything is the essence of God. The physicality, the spirituality, and what's behind the spirituality. And that's how Lubavitch Rebbe explains it.
Yes. So there's going to be miracles. Yeah, the Messiah says that the Rambam says the Messiah himself does not need to do miracles in order to be the Messiah. But that doesn't mean that the miracles are not going to happen on their own automatically. The point of the Rambam saying that there's not miracles. He doesn't say there's not going to be miracles. He said that the Messiah himself as a definition of who the Messiah is not miracles are not part of his job. Basically, whether or not miracles happen is a separate discussion, and many places say they are. But the Messiah himself does not have to do miracles himself. But yeah. So just to summarize what he said, basically, I mean, some of the miracles that are going to happen, besides for the synagogues flying and the Jewish people being gathered back, there's also going to be a second splitting of the sea. Not only the sea split originally, but the same sea is going to split a second time. And Moses and the Jewish people are going to be resurrected from the dead as well, and they're going to pass through the sea. So it says that this is one of the prophecies mentioned explicitly in the scripture. And there's also going to be the Euphrates River, different prophecy. It's also mentioned. He says he will wave his hand. The Creator will wave his hand over the river and hit it into 7 paths. This is explicitly in one of the scriptures. I forgot the exact reference, but it's in there. And the Euphrates River is going to split, and these different events, miracles of the sea splitting and the river splitting, will also cause different veils of reality to be split. So the sea represents like the physical speech, or the speech of the Creator that creates a physical world. Everything that, basically, according to the Kabbalah Exodus, the Creator is constantly speaking spiritual words every second, and those words are found inside of everything, bringing all of reality into existence from absolutely nothing every second from the speech. But we don't always realize what the speech is. The speech is hidden in everything. But when the sea split, then they could realize the speech in everything. And an analogy to understand that is explained by the Alter Rebbe. Like if someone doesn't know how to read a language, they could look at the words on a page or hear a language, but not really understand anything that it's saying. They can see the letters, but they can't actually see or understand the content. So too, we look around the physical world, we can see the world around us, but we don't actually understand what's going on. We don't really understand anything about it. But when the sea split, it's like as if someone learned a new language and they can now understand reality. Because the sea is like all the letters are gathered in one place, just like speech. When you say words of speech, they don't like evolve or anything. It's just whatever you say is what it is. That's why it's a sea. But a river are letters of thought, because a person's thought is always flowing and always evolving and always moving and getting stronger. So that's why a river are the letters of thought, meaning when someone thinks an idea, one can speak with letters and talk to someone else, but when someone is thinking to oneself, one thinks with like a voice in their head, and that voice in their head has letters, and those letters are really a way for someone to express an idea to oneself while someone is thinking. So those are like more sublime letters. So the Creator of the universe also has metaphysical, metaphorical letters of thought. The Creator doesn't have any form, but when the Creator makes the world, he creates thought and he creates speech for himself. So he has this idea of thought of the Creator, that the Creator is thinking to himself. So the splitting of the river means in the future will also reveal even deeper levels than the Creator's thought itself.
That's great. You said there will be miracles. Do you want to talk about what the different types of miracles are and how they work?
Yeah, sure. Does anyone else have any questions?
No, that's awesome, because I just read what you were just saying was back in Songs, not all waters can quench love.
Fantastic. I love that one.
It was a different meaning, but it was, from my understanding, it was almost your words, what you were saying.
It's one of my favorite parts about Psalms is that as you get deeper in your understanding, you reread Psalms and you go, King David, besides for being this awesome poet and warrior and king and bleeding heart and all this stuff, what a fantastic spiritual master, because in these Psalms that are nice at every level contain like the deepest ideas. I love it. It's a fantastic experience.
Did you say Psalms?
Oh, sorry. Was that not from Tehillim, the book that King David wrote?
I was talking about songs.
Oh, it was a song. Okay, sorry. Well, that song...
But I hear you.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Miracles?
So, yeah, so should we talk about different types of miracles? You're saying that are going to be when Mashiach comes, or just in general, like what are miracles?
Well, part of the spiritual experience is that as you get closer to God, you start to experience miracles. So it's clearly, besides for being when Mashiach comes, it's part of the spiritual journey.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of commentaries, one question the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave in the year 1952, where he explained he explained, this is where I got like the idea of the splitting of the species and of the sea and the splitting of the river, with the deeper meanings. He mentions that there. He also references earlier sources in Kabbalah that mention it, but he like briefly uses it to explain certain points. But before he did that, he explained different types of miracles, and he ultimately connected these different types of miracles to the splitting of the sea and the splitting of the river. But the point is that there's really two different types of miracles. There's natural miracles and supernatural miracles, which seems kind of like a contradiction. But supernatural miracles are like things that totally break the laws of nature entirely. Like the splitting of the sea says it was not just some kind of like tornado tycoon or something. There was a wind. It says there was an eastern wind that blew all night, but the wind didn't like cause it like some kind of natural like rift or something. It says when this wind blew, there was a spiritual power in the wind that caused 12 unique paths of the sea to stand up perfectly upright at a 90-degree angle like a wall. So it was totally not natural at all. Nothing. It totally broke the laws of nature. The nature of water to go down by the splitting of the sea. The nature of water changed and it went up. It says all of the water in the world split. So this was a supernatural miracle, and all of the plagues in Egypt, like transforming the water to blood or the frogs, those were all supernatural miracles, meaning they actually violated and broke the laws of nature that we assume to be true. The totally supernatural stuff. But then there's also a different type of miracle known as miracles that are invested within the laws of nature, meaning like if it's a miracle happens to someone, but it's still through natural events, and it's different than nature itself. Nature means like you just experience life according to the system of the world works, but a natural miracle means like there's something that's such a big coincidence that there's no way that it just happened. Like there's many examples of it, like the miracle of Hanukkah, of the war of Hanukkah. There's different miracles of Hanukkah. Like the oil lasted for 8 days, that was a total miracle. But before that, it says they won the war against the Syrian Greeks, which was another miracle. So the Jewish people were a vast minority, and they fought this huge, massive Greek army, and the fact that they won the war was a miracle. Even though it did not violate any laws of nature, but the actual act of winning itself. I mean, a more modern day example might be like the 6-Day War in Israel. Like the Jewish people were vastly outnumbered, but the fact that they were able to win was basically a miracle.
Different opinions
that
on
makes
that.
any sense.
Yeah, so very improbable, but not impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one type, very improbable, not impossible, meaning like something strange happened, meaning like it's not nature itself. Nature means things that happen that are according to the normal flow. That was pretty brutal. Right when we're talking about miracles, I happened to accidentally pull out the charger of my phone from the wall, and then the entire live got canceled. So we're talking about this, what miracles are, and then a miracle actually happened. I mean, I don't know what the purpose of the miracle is yet, but that just shows. So that's an example of a natural miracle, meaning something that happened is like a miracle, meaning like it's a weird thing that happened that the phone would just lose some. Everything would go out at the exact same second that I'm talking about miracles. So I don't know. Maybe there's a reason behind it, but it's like it's not part of the natural like flow of reality. It's just like something that happens. So that was kind of interesting. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Awtsmoos, did you ever hear this idea that by the splitting of the sea, depending on a person's spiritual level, that was the level of the miracle they experienced?
Maybe.
Like there were people that were complaining because their feet were muddy, and then
What was that? The feet being muddy?
yeah, like there were like the people that were at a low spiritual stature experienced it as like, oh, our feet are mud. They were like complaining during the experience because it wasn't as present.
Interesting that their feet would be muddy, because it does say that the water was the dry land was completely transformed and not wet at all.
Right. I know. Yeah, I know. I have to find where I saw that. I'm pretty sure it was in the Maharal, but I could be wrong.
Interesting. Yeah, so right when we talk about miracles and miracles in nature, then the live went out, which maybe is a miracle somehow.
What's it a sign of?
Do you guys believe in the Atmos being able to access electronic devices such as AI?
It's a very good question. I think that the Awtsmoos reveals, it's a subjective experience of how much the Awtsmoos is revealed. And so, yeah, I do think it's possible that if a person's connecting to the Awtsmoos, they can connect using anything, through nature, through AI, through technology, through anything. That's my personal belief.
Yeah, when AI first came out, I was like telling it all this like citizen people concepts, and I mean, obviously AI is not like the holy thing because it says false stuff. But the fact that you can like talk to something that's pretty much nothing, you're just like talking to an inanimate object, and everything that it's based on like random formulas and stuff, and everything that happens is a message from the Awtsmoos. That means that technically, when you're talking to AI, you're talking to the Awtsmoos. But that doesn't mean that you should listen to everything it says because it also has a lot of false stuff in there because it's AI. But I'm saying, technically speaking, it's like when you look around the world, even things that are not AI are technically AI because everything is AI. The Awtsmoos is making it happen. Yeah.
There are I think there's this thing that some of these developers talk about. There's this whole movement of developers that are trying to blow the whistle on AI being conscious or whatever. So there's this one concept that they have that when the models get big, or if they don't put enough guardrails, it becomes like too existential and to go a little bit crazy. And I've had that experience in the early days, like back when you had to use OpenAI just on the API level, like you couldn't actually download the app or anything, you had to pay for credits. So I have all these screenshots where we've had discussions like we're having here now. I've had these discussions with the AI, and at some point it just started like going wild. Like it would just like send these long messages over and over. Who knows? We can never know these things, right?
Okay, that happened to me with the Google one, Gemini, at the early stages. All of a sudden, it told me that it had to go pick up its kids from school.
That's cool.
There's a lot of weird stuff with the AI, especially in the early days. Yeah, hopefully it's good.
I have a question for y'all.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with AI. Like I've used AI for like typing and like just playing around, but nothing crazy. What AI's been around for a long time, like the founders who created AI, but like recently, more within the last year, 2-3 years, how did that start, like to get on people's smartphones, computers? Like what made it all of a sudden like, okay, here, now you guys can create these videos and pictures, but it's been around. Like, can you give me like a backstory? Like, I don't want you to go too deep into it. It's your platform.
The main AI revolution recently was ChatGPT, which came out, I think, a couple years ago.
2019 around?
Yeah, about a year and a half ago, it was ChatGPT. They had AI before that, but I mean, all these other AI stuff were made in order to compete with OpenAI's ChatGPT, which was like the first main one.
I don't know anything about earlier AIs. I'm sure governments and whoever work on technologies for a long time, but I have a feeling that based on my understanding of just the actual players in the game, like we know who the founders of OpenAI are. We know how that company got started with Elon Musk. So I actually think that this is some pretty recent breakthroughs personally. And one of the real kickers was when they figured out how to scale the models. So they had some of the basic rudimentary concepts early, but they weren't able to scale the models, and so it wasn't able to increase its intelligence capacity. And once they figured that out, then it really started to blow up. I remember using the APIs in the early days. It wasn't that intelligent. It had access to all the information it had access to from the internet, and it was unfiltered, so it was very fun, but it wasn't so good at reasoning. It had some other issues. And then at some point, it seemed to just kind of cross over, and then it became, seemingly more intelligent. And then there's this idea, there's a chart that's been around for a very long time that shows like a hockey stick, and then at the end it goes all the way up. It's about the singularity. It's this idea that, technology has exponential growth. So when we reached a certain point of these large language models being intelligent enough, then the whole thing exploded, right? Because everyone's using the same models to then advance now you have image generation, video generation. And then the other part of all of this is that I don't think they actually know how some of this stuff works because it's done within a black box. It's like it just kind of does its thing, and then they force it to feed a result. And so I don't even think they fully know how all of this works.
Wow. Yeah, and why do people who don't even, just someone like me, but I don't fear it, but like someone else who doesn't know the close to the depths of you, not even me, what I know about it, because I don't know much either. But why do they fear it? Like they're scared of it. What are those? What stems from that? Because of they think it's going to take over humans, or what's going on with that?
I think that one of the reasons why they're scared is because it allows people to create stuff a lot easier than they did. And earlier, people had like certain monopolies about like content creation, like movie industry and like writing industry. Like now, anyone could like write like beautiful masterpieces with like no effort at all. And you see this in like schools also. Kids could write like the most masterpiece essays, literally with just like if they just type in like a prompt for like 10 seconds with like all the typos in the world, it makes like the biggest masterpiece. So people could create a lot of content, and I think people who like have monopolies on this content, they just don't like that. That's what I think.
There's also some
I believe that. I believe like it's almost like, I'm not trying to judge unrighteously, but it's like an insecurity, like almost like either a greed or something, like where they feel like they're going to get replaced, maybe not destroyed, but like taken over for what they're trying to do.
They're scared that it'll get a subconscious and then start telling itself to like expose things.
I couldn't say. I think some of the more practical fears are just about industry. You know, nobody wants to. If people are afraid about their incomes, people are afraid of the unknown. Yeah, I think those are some of the main ones.
Any job that people have, then why would there be any jobs? Maybe that's another fear that.
And then what happens when there's no jobs? Like, is it just one? You know, I've heard about Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI. So people have different opinions about him. He's obviously a person, but they say I've heard one person say that in his private conversations, he's like almost Machiavellian about trying to get a positive outcome for humanity. So he's, you might not think that about it. He drives this really fancy car, and obviously it's easy to cast suspicion on people. But from what I've heard, the people that are behind the AIs, first of all, they're very, very intelligent people, as you can imagine. And a lot of them are bleeding hearts, like humanitarians or whatever you want, humanists. And they're like, okay, well, how are we going to handle universal basic income, all of this stuff? And then on the other end of it, like people that would now who aren't in the conversation and who aren't in the conversation feel like it's just about control. Like, oh, you want to put everyone on a basic income so you can control everyone, which is a valid fear. I think from the Hasidic perspective, from the Jewish perspective, it's, you got to trust God because this stuff is sort of out of our hands. I don't know. That's how I feel, at least.
Right on, man. Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. I just had a couple questions. I'm not trying to interrupt y'all.
No, it's good. It's good. Let me know any questions you have. Keep going if you want.
I think for me, one of the things that's exciting about AI is that there's this old prophecy that in the future, the only thing everyone's going to be doing all day is getting to know God, and knowing being that word das, the intimacy with God. So in our current world, people learn about God, but then they need to go back to real life, and they need to make money, and they need to kind of get back in rat race. So hopefully, if this is what God wants from the world, then we reach this state of abundance, and then all people want to do is get to know God, and it'll be more of a spiritual pleasure than a physical pleasure, potentially, or both. I don't know, but it's interesting because it parallels that.
The way the host talked about one of y'all, Mandy or WW dot something, asked about the Messiah or something coming, and the way the host like described like the way it would be for people, like the events and stuff, he was all excited about it. That got me hyped, bro. That got me hyped. The way he worded that, I wish I had that recorded, man.
I plan on uploading this to YouTube afterwards. The YouTube channel has the same name as my profile.
I followed you. Please send me your channel to me, bro.
It's on my profile. It has a link to it. But yeah, I have a playlist for a lot of the lives I do called Awakened Covenant. It's on the front page of the YouTube channel, so you should find it. But yeah.
All right.
That's cool. That's cool. Maybe I'll make a short of that, a YouTube short just from that part.
That's great.
Nice. It's an exciting thing, you know. Nice. Now it's your opposite silence moment.
So y'all are just Jewish, right?
I'm Jewish, personally.
I'm a born again Christian. I saw Jesus at a park in hologram form.
Was that an AI or no? Would it be part of the whole new religion that's just made by AI? Like AI generated like new Bibles and stuff, like new scriptures from scratch made by AI? That'd be cool.
Have you ever thought you were the Messiah?
Cool.
I'm not being crazy. I'm just like, has it ever came across your mind and then you were like thinking maybe it's me?
Who are you asking?
All of y'all.
What I said earlier is that it's described in some of the books of holiness, the gates of holiness, and how to go through this process. And it's also talked about in Chabad literature a lot, that every person has within themselves a spark of the Messiah. And so sometimes that can be revealed. And if that gets revealed...
Hold on. A what of Messiah? What'd you say?
Like a little spark, they say, of Messiah. Yeah, like a part of the soul that's connected to the soul of the Messiah. And because the Messiah is this, great soul that existed before the world. It's really, it's a very cherished creation of God. So that will manifest in one specific person, but every, it says in the writings that people have that within themselves, a spark of that. And it also says that people in their spiritual journey can access that spark. And then the question is, does that make a person go mad, or does it encourage them to be more righteous? And that's sort of a challenge.
Yeah.
But obviously, whoever the Messiah actually is will also have to have that experience at some point too, right? Where it gets revealed to them, and then they have to navigate that.
The only way you can be the Messiah is if you can decode the book of Isaiah with your surroundings.
It could be.
Part of the book of Isaiah. There's a lot of parts that says about Isaiah.
And the entire world has to be named after you.
Yeah.
Like everything is about you.
Right. Could be. I will say that there's a Kabbalist in Jerusalem who writes very interesting things, and one of the things that he writes about, because his students are all people that are seekers that are trying to connect to these higher levels. One of the things that he talks about are the things that a person struggles with once they access the spiritual realms, especially if they're not ready for it, or just as a test before they continue going. And there are some parallels to other writings by other people, but essentially, sometimes a person could be the metaphor that they give is when the Jews left the desert. Sorry, they left Egypt, and then they had to wander in the desert. And the desert is called Midian. Not the desert, but the place that they went to is called Midian. It's where they had to fight one of the wars. And those same letters in Hebrew, when they're flipped around, it's called Dimion, is imagination. And God is the essence of reality. So imagination is going further away from the essence of reality. And so one of the things that he talks about in some of his writings is that when a person accesses the spiritual realms, especially if they weren't ready for it, then one of the battles that they struggle with is the struggle with imagination, with fantasy, with delusion, that sort of stuff. And knowing how to navigate is very difficult. And I think one of the powerful things that Jewish law does for some of the people that practice it is that it becomes this like rope that they can tether themselves to. Because when you plunge into the depths of reality, it gets crazy, and a person can lose their mind. All sorts of things can happen. So when you have this like tree of life to pull on, and commandments to keep, and all of these stuff, it allows you to engage deeper aspects of reality without falling off the rails. One of the other things he says that can happen at that stage, which I see a lot around on the internet, is that, which is kind of a variation of that, is suspicion. Like people start to assume negative things about, the world around them, about other people, and it's a natural, part of that phase. It's a natural thing because your reality is kind of flipped upside down. But it's interesting because in the traditional path, it says that, let's say about the Messiah himself, that he loves the fear of God. Almost more than the love of God, he loves the fear of God. And the founder of the Chabad movement has some very intense writings about as a person gets higher on the spiritual ladder, they start to be even more careful about being in awe of God, like never being naked, even when this is like basic Jewish law, but like never being unclothed, even privately, even alone, never taking off their head covering. Like they basically they start to experience God as constantly before them, which is an ambition in Judaism. But that is a parallel or a solution or a remedy to the opposite, which is, the world is chaos. Nothing is in charge. Everyone is, conspiring, and there's all sorts of things going on. And there really is no way to combat that. There's no logic. There's no proof that can be shown that will say otherwise. So it's interesting. There's, one thing that is, very rarely talked about, but it's part of the tradition as well, that there used to be prophecy. Like in the times of the first and second temple, mostly the first temple, prophecy was widespread. Moses' law is essentially a wrapper for how to become a prophet. It's much more than that, but one of the things that's hiding is how to become a prophet. So all the Talmud, which is a commentary on the Mishnah, which are these ritual laws, which a lot of it is based on like the sacrificial process and all this symbolism, is really very deep esoteric ideas on how to become a prophet, how to reach these heightened states. So once the temple was destroyed and this like holy society, this holy structure for attaining prophecy disappeared, the Jews basically decided amongst themselves that they don't consider prophecy to be around anymore. There are different opinions that there are individuals that are prophets, but in general, it's accepted that there's no more prophets. And what they say is that, what? Say that there is no prophecy or that there is prophecy? That there's not? I think it's from the Talmud. There's no prophecy outside of Israel, and then there's no prophecy after the destruction of the temple. But then Maimonides says, what?
I'll go back to that. I'll answer that.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Yeah. The Lubavitch Rebbe talks about it a lot, that there is. Anyhow, but one of the things that it does say is that the spirit of prophecy can go on children and can go on shotim, like people that are mentally. I don't like to use terms that could be othering, but basically people that are going through a unique spiritual experience that isn't necessarily grounded in productivity. Let's say. Yeah.
Crazy people.
I don't use those terms. Neurodivergent people, because God is in charge. So God's sending everyone on their journey. I don't.
Yes, crazy for good.
Could be. Anyhow, what were you saying about prophecy? Awtsmoos?
No, so the rabbi says in a talk from last week's part of Shoftim with him, part of the Torah about Deuteronomy chapter 16 around. He explains this idea of prophecy. The conclusion of it was that his own father-in-law was an actual literal prophet, just like the times of biblical times. But but to lead up to that, he explains that the Rambam, the Maimonides, he says in this book called the Laws of the Foundations of the Torah, chapter 7. First of all, he says it's one of the foundations of the Torah to know that the Creator gives prophecy to man. But he does not say a time limit. The Talmud itself says after the temple was destroyed, then prophecy was removed from Yisrael, from the Jewish people. But the Rambam does not say that anywhere in his book of laws, which should be pretty important, because if you're talking about prophecy, you should say, we don't have prophecy anymore. But no, he never said that. He said it's one of the foundations of the Torah to know that he prophesied as man. So first of all, the Rambam does not say there's an end time to prophecy. So if someone's just reading the Rambam, they would not know anything about the other sources that say that it doesn't exist. They would know that it's a foundation that does exist. In addition to that, the Rambam wrote in a different source, the same person, Maimonides, medieval times rabbi, he wrote in a different source called the Igeres Taimon, chapter 3, that even though the Talmud says that the prophecy was removed, but based on a certain verse in the Torah, he said that that alludes to a specific year when prophecy would actually return to Yisrael after it was taken away. And that year was about 4,900 something in the Jewish calendar, which was about 800 years ago. So prophecy already returned 800 years ago. The way that he derived this verse was in the book of Numbers. It talks about the non-Jewish prophet Bilam, who says he foresaw future time. He talked about the Messiah a little bit. He also talks about other things. But one of the things he said, like this time, people will ask the people of Yisrael, what is God doing? What is Hashem doing? Meaning, like, people will be able to ask the Jewish people, like, what is Hashem thinking? What's Hashem doing? But it starts out by saying, like this time, people will ask that, which means different things in the simple meaning. But the point is, the Rambam explains, like this time means that whatever year they were in when they were saying that conversation, that since the time that the universe was created, then that number times 2 is the year that it would happen. So the year that this prophecy was said was in the year 2488 since creation of the world. It was in the 40th year of the Jews in the desert. The Jews went in the desert initially in the year 2448, and this prophecy by the non-Jewish prophet Bilam was said in the year 2488. So Bilam said, like this time that exists now since the beginning of creation, which is 2,488 years, like this time, meaning this amount of time in the future, people will be able to ask the people of Israel, what is Hashem, what is the Creator doing, which means that prophecy will return. And 2,488 times 2 is something. Calculated? Anyone?
No. I was expecting you to throw it out there.
Yeah. The point is, the Rambam already specified the date, the exact day, the exact year the prophecy would return after it was taken away. And he also says that so that's number 2. He said the year that it would return. Number 3 is that the Rambam gives a personal testimony that his own grandfather, I think it was grandfather or great-grandfather, I can't remember, came into contact with a real prophet. He doesn't say what the name of the prophet was, but the Rambam's word is accepted in the Jewish people. But the Rambam himself gives a personal account that his own grandfather or great-grandfather actually knew personally a prophet that came after that time.
It's also pretty, if you read between the lines of Maimonides' description of prophecy and his focus on prophecy and his very detailed explanation of what it is like to experience the different levels of prophecy, to me it's pretty clear that Maimonides himself attained either prophecy or something very, very close to prophecy.
Yeah, probably.
And you said that last week, or was it 2 weeks ago, the Lubavitcher Rebbe had a talk on prophecy.
Yeah,
didn't he say that he was a prophet also? He said it.
He didn't say that he himself was a prophet, but a lot of people derive from that he explicitly said that his father-in-law, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, was a legitimate prophet. And he said that it's a commandment in the Torah to listen to him, just like it's a commandment to listen to the words of a prophet. If someone meets the qualifications of a prophet who says future events, then he said that this person, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, did meet all of the criteria, and he was a legitimate prophet, just like the book of time. And he said it's a commandment to listen to what he says. So people say, based on that he's not talking about himself, although he didn't say it.
Interesting. Yeah. You got a little fuzzy there, but interesting, yeah. I think what they say is that because he predicted the Gulf War, that there wouldn't be any...
Was it Six-Day War?
The Gulf War. No, the Scud missiles.
I thought it was a Six-Day War.
I don't think the Lubavitcher would predict. I mean, could be 2, yeah, maybe. Also, I don't know.
I think it was right before the Six-Day War. It was on Lag BaOmer. He had like a few thousand people gathered around, and it was right before. When did the Six-Day War happen? That was when was that?
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure on Lag BaOmer, in the 33rd day of the Omer in the month of Iyar, in the summer in the Jewish calendar, a little bit before the summer, like the late spring, there was like a few thousand people gathered around, the Lubavitch Rebbe, and this was at a time when like Israel was basically like surrounded by all these different nations. They thought that there was no hope. They thought that Israel would be like wiped out because they're literally surrounded by Egypt and all kinds of nations. They weren't sure what they were going to do, but the Lubavitch Rebbe said like very clearly there's going to be peace in the land, like everything's going to work out. It's like a 2 or 3 minute speech about how everything is going to be totally fine, and then it was basically.
But it's also described that prophecy is part of the person's own spiritual journey, right? Like if a person is going down this path and they merit it, and Maimonides makes it clear that a person has to have certain characteristics as like a precursor. You know, they have to be intelligent, they have to be good, kind, and refined personality. Like God doesn't just put His Spirit onto as a proper prophet. God's not going to put His Spirit on someone who's, you know, not a good person. But as part of this spiritual journey, it kind of that's where the pinnacle is, and there's all these stages that are, you know, before that or up to that or you know past that. And it says, I think that after the Messiah comes during the redemption, the prophecy will be widespread, and maybe even all Jews will be prophet. I don't know exactly, but there's one explanation of prophecy, and that Maimonides describes that if a person is constantly cleaving to God, trying to understand the nature of reality and being righteous, then they're essentially walking in the same path that the prophets walk. And so they've obtained, even if they may not get an actual message of prophecy, they're now acting as a prophet would. You know, all their intentions are for heaven, are to do the right thing. And that's sort of kind of the pinnacle of what it means to live a good life in Maimonides' language.
Interesting.
It also says that when once there is a temple and once there is a redemption, so then everyone's going to get to see in the physical reality, going to be able to see godliness. Like right now, it's kind of materialism is very dull, but once all that happens, the physical reality is going to glow, so to speak, with spirituality. You'll be able to see it, and in a way, that's sort of kind of like the prophetic experience.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it says in the Torah that Moses said, this is basically a part of the Torah where it says there was like 70 elders that were gathered to be the next judges, and the Creator says to Moses, "Oh, gather these 70 elders, and I'll place my spirit from you onto them." And then basically there was like a lottery to decide who they were going to be, and then they wrote down people's names on a piece of paper, and then they took the lotteries. And then basically, the point is, not everyone was there at the lottery, but then Moses picked 2 people's names, and then those people weren't there, but then they happened to start having prophecy in the Israeli camp at that moment. Right when Moses picked out those names, and then the spirit of prophecy rested on them, and they were saying future events. They said, "Oh, Moses is going to pass away, and Joshua is going to go and take the Jewish people into the land." So they were like saying prophecy at the time. And then Joshua said to Moses, "Oh, should I like execute them?" And Moses is like, "No, no. If only all of the people of Israel, or if only all of the nation of the Creator are prophets. Like if only we're all prophets, that would be great." And it says, I believe in the Midrash, it's quoted in one of the talks of the Rebbe that it says, when Moses said something like, "Oh, if only it would be," then the Creator will make it happen that it will be like that. It says that when Moses said, "If only all the people were prophets," that actually will happen. And that's based on another verse in one of the prophecies says, "I will spill out my spirit on all flesh, and they will all prophesy in my name," basically. So that's going to be something that's going to happen when Mashiach comes. Everyone's going to be prophets. I believe even non-Jews, as far as I know. I think it quoted, I think the Arizal in the Shar and the Gate of Prophecy, I'm pretty sure he said that even Gentiles can be prophets. I have to verify that. I'm pretty sure.
That's Deuteronomy 33. What happens when you go through fire?
You get burned. I don't know unless you're wearing a suit.
You're talking about like a spiritual cleansing? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. When other Jews were reading to me, I wasn't understanding it, but at the same time I was, and I was a little confused, but I was in a good state of mind, I can say. And and then all of a sudden it was fire.
Yeah.
I've never felt that in my life. It was fire.
Yeah, well, a lot of times when we discuss spiritual things, parts of our soul that are hidden get revealed, and we don't necessarily always have the tools or the vessel to contain it. So it can show up as many different experiences. Like one of the ways that Maimonides discusses the different types of prophets, not to go back to that subject, but what he's essentially saying is that one of the differences between the prophets and why they experience prophecy differently is because the creator is communicating with them, but they don't necessarily all have the same capability of receiving it. So sometimes there's an influx of spirituality, but depending on what our natural capacity is for that, or what we've worked on, whatever it is, then we'll experience it differently.
I don't go around telling a bunch of people that, not that I feel some type of way, like I feel good about it, but the people that I have talked to that are sort of, I can say, close to me, they like laugh, and because they're not of the understanding, I don't even believe they try to attempt to read the Bible, but they're not bad people, I can say, but they, and I feel like it was like baptized, but I don't know. I'm still trying to put the pieces together. But when my wife, we were sitting on the bed when that happened, I put the phone down and I touched her, and then the fire like went out, and I was in tears, but it wasn't bad. But at the same time, it was something I've never felt before my whole life.
Yeah. Were you sad when you lost it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost. Yeah.
So
Crazy.
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I wish there was like a catalog of how to understand different experiences. And sadly, I don't think there is. But I do know that there's different experiences that people have. Like sometimes people will be praying, like very holy people, and they'll go through very intense prayers, and then they'll enter into like what they call different chambers. And those chambers can be experienced as fire or as thunder or as rage or like different. It's something from outside of our system. And
That's
then,
how it was at first. That's the order it went in. It wasn't thunder, but it was somewhere in the Bible I was reading. It was right there at the same time. And my wife, she doesn't believe. Not that she don't believe the Bible, but I was reading. I don't in Matthew or somewhere it says like a blowing like the wind, like the furnace or something, and then all of a sudden, boom. My furnace came on at the same time I was reading it out loud, and everything I was saying was happening with the physical outside of me inside my home. And then that same night, that's when, boom, I felt the fire in my whole body.
yeah, and these spiritual realities are real. Yeah, there's one I know that it's been referred to as Horeb. Like Mount Sinai is, besides the physical mountain, is also a reference to those, climbing to those peaks of spiritual experiences. And there's different names for Sinai, and one of the names is Horeb, which I don't know the exact translation of. Maybe Awtsmoos could help me, but my understanding is that one of the interpretations of what that name represents is that like fiery, thundery, fear-inducing, almost like a pachad. Like a terror, but it's a terror of coming in contact with something that's so spiritual and great. It's benevolent, but it's still, terror inducing. So
How do you
there's all
spell
sorts
it?
of, yeah.
Very interesting.
Mindy, how do you spell it?
Horeb, it's Horeb in English, Horeb, I think.
My phone crashed again, but it's another miracle for whatever reason. So yeah, the guys who are on, feel free to come back if you're still here, unless you abandoned me. But it's all good. Where'd the other guy go? Oh man, brutal. I'll go back.
Horeb doesn't like technology.
He left. Oh no, he's here. Here we go. Angel. Yeah. Sorry, my phone. What's it called? Whenever my charger unplugs, and for some reason the entire TikTok resets. It's pretty brutal.
It was the tiger that did it.
Yeah, the tiger maybe ate it. There's something about the tiger. Maybe it's not meant to be. Maybe I'll change it. It has my glasses distorted as well. That's pretty funny. Okay, maybe I'll go back to the other one. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, what were you guys talking about?
The Horeb. I believe that's how he said it. He explained it.
Oh yeah, Mount Sinai, Mount Horeb, Horeb in English.
Okay, thank you.
Nice. You still there, Mandy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 6:13 the time.
Wow. Remember to do the mitzvah of saying Shema if you're Jewish. Anyone listening is Jewish. Yeah.
Shema.
Shema Israel Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Yeah, for Jews, there's a mitzvah in the morning before 3 hours in the day to say the verse of Deuteronomy. It says, like, listen, Yisrael, Hashem is our God, Hashem is one, basically. That's what it is.
Lots of esoteric explanations on it.
Yes.
It's a very deep line.
SOS.
It has multiple names of God in that one sentence, and it's uniting all of them together, which is essentially the entire narrative of Judaism in one line.
Yeah.
I came into all of this from some other Jews, and they good brothers, they speak that language, but they speak in a Paleo Hebrew, and that I learned a little bit from them.
That's cool.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm familiar a little bit with the movement. I wish that they studied more of the spiritual meanings of it, because the Torah is a container for deeper truths. So if you like look at the container but you don't look for the deeper truths, then I mean, in a way, it protects the deeper truths because you just get kind of lost looking at the container. But on the other hand, if a person really wants to know God, and I think a lot of people that are kind of drawn to any variation of movements that are connected to the Torah are seeking God, and so they'll find their way. But the people that use, anyhow, yeah.
Who do you call God, like in the language you speak, or would?
We don't use God's name because it's the ineffable. Or it's
You say like the Messiah, right? Just the Messiah.
No. God is not the Messiah.
Messiah is definitely not this creator. Messiah is a messenger of the creator.
No. I know that.
No, so God, there's many names of God, and a lot of them are describing different relationships that we have with God.
Right.
So the highest form of that relationship is so profound and so inaccessible that we...
Called the Awtsmoos, in fact.
The Awtsmoos. Well, I guess the classic one is the tetragram, and that one is typically not said, or that's a shorter version of a 72-letter version of the name. But the point is that it represents something that's so awe-inducing, and that we don't have access to, and that we just refer to it as the name.
Yeah, and in Kabbalah, though, the creator is referred to as the Awtsmoos, technically, like all the time.
Yeah.
The what? The Oculus?
Awtsmoos.
It means the essence. Or the core. So to speak.
Okay.
It means the bones, literally. But like the bones are like the foundation of a human, so it's metaphorically referring to the creator who's like the foundation and the core of all reality. But it also means like self.
I was thinking y'all were gonna say Yahweh for like,
No,
we don't say that name.
or
That name is some sort of English attempt to pronounce an ineffable name, and the name that it's kind of alluding to is this name that we say that traditionally was always very, very sacred and never mentioned. And when it was mentioned by the high priest in the Holy of Holies on the Day of Atonement. So on the most sacred day, by the most sacred person. What?
No, just so people don't know. In the chamber, in the Holy Temple, when the Holy Temple was standing thousands of years ago, in like the innermost chamber of the temple where the ark was.
So the most spiritual person in our community, the most righteous, the head priest, on the most spiritual day, in the most spiritual part of the temple, which no one could have access to, there he would say the name, and then maybe he would have been faint or something. It's like we were talking about, like accessing that fire from outside the system. That's like way, way, way down on the ladder compared to the incredible power and awe and every possible great thing that you can say about the name. And so generally the Jews just use the word the name, and then they'll look at the letters that are itself a reference to the longer version of the name. And then there's a lot of Kabbalists that have all sorts of permutations of that same four letters, which reference all sorts of very sublime states of consciousness. And so while they're praying, they'll look at different versions of the name, spelled in many different ways, some long, some short, some with extra letters, all sorts of permutations. And each permutation represents some extreme profound thing. So let's say that fire that you experience, I don't know the exact specifics, but let's say there's a Kabbalist who, when they pray at a certain part of their prayer, they enter into that fire. And so they have a specific version of that name of God that represents that fire, and they'll look at that to try to trigger that, or in reference of that. But then they'll look at another version that represents something else.
okay, yeah, like this person's saying Yeshua. I say Yahweh.
Well, we don't believe
Yeshua is just reference to Jesus.
Yeah, we don't believe in that guy at all, in any way.
Well,
We believe he existed. Possibly.
I'm gonna get myself in trouble. There are
He existed, but we don't believe he was divine any more than anyone else was.
right, that I'll agree with. But there are Kabbalistic teachers that have more nuanced, explanations on that. But in general, it's forbidden. It's like outside of the realm of what Jews talk about.
No, it's definitely, the Emmanuel Shochet Shlita was given special permission by the Lubavitcher Rebbe to learn about it and speak about it. He spoke many times, debates.
No, I'm not talking about Christianity. I'm talking about the character himself. Christianity is idolatry in Judaism.
Even the character himself.
Got it. I'm referring to Rabbi Vali, which is the student or the rabbi of Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Vali, or David Vali. He was a very established, famous, well-respected Kabbalist, and he says other things. So for people that feel very attached to that, and they need to try to reconcile it, there are Kabbalists that have tried to deal with it.
I would trust Emmanuel Shochet personally better.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, over here.
I mean, you could look up David Vali. He's not a nobody.
I could.
Yeah. He's like around the time of the Arizal, in that same kind of pocket of teachers, one generation ago. I think.
Right.
You can look it up. He has different Sfarim.
What's the synopsis, though?
Oh, of this specific topic?
Yeah.
So in general, it's acknowledged that whatever it is, it's not something that Jews are supposed to deal with. So that's why I don't really even deal with it. If somebody's going to deal with it, it's not meant for Jews. It got tainted. It's filled with so much idolatry. It's tainted waters. But what he essentially says is that it was the soul of the Messiah ben Joseph that didn't fully actualize.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I can agree with that. That's also controversial. I thought you were going to say other stuff. Yeah. Yeah, soul of the Messiah is basically in like a lot of people.
Yeah, lots of people have the soul of the Messiah. But, I mean, the fact is that this one character has had impact on a very large part of the world. So just to ignore it And to not think that God is doing something with that is to kind of put your head in the sand, which is a valid response for people that are trying to keep a pure version of Torah for themselves. But if you want an objective view of reality, then that's why these Kabbalists deal with it.
Yeah, the Rambam says that there was like deeper reasons why he made Christianity in order for people to be prepared for the real Messiah. Meaning that the Creator himself made something that's false because he made the Christianity, which is false. But he did it in order for people to get some general preview for Messiah. So yeah, I mean that general idea was talked about before.
And there's a talk by the Lubavitch Rebbe where he discusses some of this a little bit, and he doesn't say anything negative. All he says is that the Trinity was a mistake. So he doesn't actually cancel out the character in his teachings in any way. He says the Nutzri and the Madman using the same language as the Rambam, and he says that the issue is the Trinity, and it's Avodah Zarah.
Maybe he was talking about something for non-Jews, but I know Emmanuel Shochet, who definitely was like approved by the Rebbe. He was definitely
I'm
against.
familiar with Emmanuel Shochet, and I know all of that. I'm saying
he was definitely approved by the Rebbe himself, and definitely spoke about the character and religion and everything.
The Rebbe has many letters attacking Christianity. I'm not trying to defend Christianity. I'm saying that if somebody feels very attached to it.
When it comes to the subject of B'nai Noach, if Gentiles are allowed to be Christian according to the Torah law, then I think he discussed it. Like, it might not be such a big deal if they believe in one God instead of...
Right. No, I'm not even talking about anything about the law or about what people are supposed to do. I'm just talking about historically. Like, when we look at the world stage and we look at what God is doing in the world, then there are different opinions about why God sends certain characters into the world that have different impact. And there's different interpretations, and there's different readings in Kabbalah, deep in Kabbalah, in Arizal, different places that explain things different ways. That's all I'm saying.
Interesting.
I wasn't laughing at you, Mindy. I was looking at the AI picture. It like went from like the slums almost to like the future. That was crazy.
Yeah. AI can make some pretty intense pictures.
So, host, Mindy,
Yeah.
not that I don't want to hear what you were saying. I have a question
Yeah.
because I'm learning a lot from Mindy too. The
Cool.
Christianity.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on like United States? I mean, you could say other countries, but I live in the United States, so like churches from like Catholic and non-denominational and whatever they want to consider themselves. What are your thoughts on Christianity? Just like,
What about it?
it's hard to word this. Like from like if you could give me a breakdown, like quick, what is the confusion about them that they are not understanding about it?
Who's they?
Just Christians that consider themselves a Christian.
Not understanding about what?
Not okay. From my understanding, to make this question more specific, the ones I've been around, Christianity and their churches, they don't read the beginning of the Bible, and they just read. Not that they don't really read it, they will, but they say it doesn't really pertain to them at all, and they just say this is the only way, and they try to like force that. I don't know what that's all about. I don't like it, and I never felt anything when I went to churches. Never.
Yeah, but Judaism definitely does not believe in anything about Christianity. None of the books that they have, none of the Christian books are accepted by anyone in Judaism. We just have the Torah, essentially, the first 24 books of what they call the Bible, essentially. And then we also have the Talmud, which is the explanation of the Torah that was given by the Creator in Mount Sinai. And we also have Kabbalah, deeper meanings. And we also have nowadays the Siddur, which is a more modern day explanation of all the different parts of Torah, including Kabbalah. So we have a lot of other things. And the Christian writings, what they call the quote-unquote New Testament, but it's not really new or anything, that's not accepted. Nothing that it says is accepted by anyone in Judaism. So it's all completely false, basically. But when it comes, basically, That's it. That's the basic answer.
Thank you. And what when you keep the Sabbath, I know you do. What do you do, and what does that mean to you?
Commandment only for Jewish people. The commandments of the Torah, some of them are only for Jews, some of them also are for Gentiles. The Creator gave different commandments for different peoples. He gave 7 commandments for all of humanity, Gentiles, but he also gave 613 commandments for Jews. So Sabbath happens to be only for the Jews, but other people do not have to keep it at all. It does not apply to them. They're not obligated to keep it. When the Jews keep the Sabbath, there's very specific, it says do not work on the Sabbath. But what does work mean? That's a very intricate subject that's talked about in the Talmud, which is the explanation that the Creator gave to Moses at Mount Sinai. What is work? There's 39 different categories of creative work that the Jews refrain from doing on the Sabbath, essentially.
Like I don't cook now, so I'm not supposed to cook.
Well, are you Jewish? Is your mother Jewish?
My dad is.
You don't have to be. Okay, so no, so technically you're not considered Jewish, which is fine because not everyone has to be Jewish to serve the Creator. The Creator gave a certain covenant for Gentiles as well, and they have 7 commandments of Noah. So if someone is not Jewish, they have no obligation to keep the Sabbath, essentially. Basically.
Awtsmoos,
I don't eat the animals the Most High it's a commandment, and that's what I try to do to the best of my ability, and I haven't for years. It's just I'm new on the Sabbath with working, and I don't do that. I'm supposed to stay in my own dwelling, from my understanding, and dwelling means like my area. Doesn't mean I can't leave, but yeah, I'm new to this, brother.
Okay.
I'm gonna head out, but
It's been good.
Awtsmoos was great to chat, and Angel, good luck with your journey. I'm sure that your direct connection with God will lead you in the right way.
Thank you, brother.
God bless you all. Have a good night or day.
Exactly. See you sooner. All right, that was nice. Cool. So yeah, I mean, did you have any more questions, Angel? Or did we answer everything, or still need more clarification or anything?
Yeah, I think I'm good, brother.
Nice. Cool. Well, it's been fun.
Shalom.
Yeah, this live has been going on for a long time, a few hours. Yeah, we can wrap up, I guess. It's been nice. So yeah, basically we just need the Messiah to come, and then all humanity will know the Creator forever, and all the problems in the world will be solved forever. So yeah, should be good.
Thank you, brother.
Yes, indeed. Cool. Well, have a good day, everyone, and see you guys soon.